Hey guys, tonight we step into the creaking wooden floorboards of an 18th century cottage where the hearth never truly rests and breakfast starts before the sun has the decency to rise. You rub your eyes, wrapped in a worn linen shift, tiptoeing so your footfalls don't wake the baby who, let's be honest, woke you at least twice during the night anyway. It's cold. Not chilly, not brisk cold. The kind of cold that makes you question your life choices. Your breath fogs in the air as you crouch to coax yesterday's coals into something resembling a flame. Good luck with that. You'll probably lose all feeling in your fingers before the kindling catches. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You kneel by the hearth, blowing gently into the ash like some kind of smoky enchantress. A few embers glow back in defiance, and soon a modest flame flares up. You add dry twigs, collected carefully the day before and hidden from the damp. The warmth seeps into your bones slowly, and you let yourself hover over it, hands splayed wide, pretending for just 1 second that you're in a manor house instead of a drafty cottage built out of flattery and luck. The kitchen around you is little more than a single room of soot-darkened walls, rough wood beams, and shelves lined with earthenware that have seen better centuries. Hanging from a peg near the window is a string of onions, some sprouting into green fuzz, but still edible. Maybe. The scent of last night's gruel lingers, heavy with barley and mystery. A mouse scurries near the wall, brazen and well-fed. Your first job, as always, is breakfast. Or, as it might more honestly be called, what can I cook that won't break a tooth or cause a rebellion? The bread's gone hard. Again. No surprise there. There's no such thing as fresh baked daily, unless you're married to a baker or someone rich enough to afford help. You take the crusts and soak them in yesterday's milk. Slightly sour, but not quite offensive. Not yet. While you wait, you scan the pantry. 1 egg, a handful of barley, a jug of ale so weak it might be mostly water and wishful thinking. Still, you can make this work. You always do. It's a sort of culinary witchcraft, turning scraps into sustenance. You crack the egg into a bowl. It's fresher than expected. A small miracle. You whisk it with the sour milk and toss in some chopped onion and herbs from the garden, parsley, maybe a hint of thyme, the kind of stuff that gets stuck in your teeth and makes you feel fancy. Then, with the precision of a surgeon, you pour the mixture over the soaked bread and place it near the fire in a small iron pan. You sit back. It's still early. The house is quiet, save for the creaks and occasional cough from the back room. Your hands smell like smoke and flour, and honestly, it's not terrible. You hear the shift of your oldest child stirring. She'll be out soon to help with the morning chores, or complain about the lack of jam. Historically, this kind of meal, pottage, soaked bread, a porridge of sorts, was the staple of most households across England and the colonies. Nothing wasted, nothing fancy. The richer folks upstairs, they had access to sugar, spices, and soft breads. You make do with grit and a well-seasoned pan. A weird little fact, some rural households used to place a bit of meat fat on the windowsill to soak up bad spirits, or at least distract rats from stealing the family dinner. No one knows if it worked, but hey, at least it gave the rats something to do. The food begins to crisp slightly at the edges. Your version of a breakfast bake. You use the wooden paddle to pull the pan from the fire, careful not to burn your hand again. The scar from last year's Christmas pudding is still pink across your knuckle. You serve the bake in thick slices to whoever's awake and tuck a small piece aside for yourself. One eye always on the pot, the other on the pantry. And yes, even in 1760, you think about calories, not in numbers, but in survival. Will this fill everyone enough until dinner? Should you ration the barley for the end of the week? Is it better to give the children seconds or save enough for your husband's return? Historians still argue whether women of this era were household CEOs or simply overworked support staff. Truth lies somewhere in the middle. You handle inventory, labor, scheduling, sanitation, and, most days, emergency rodent control. If that's not executive level, what is? You finally sit down, plate in hand, and let the heat of the food fog up your face. It's good enough. Actually, it's better than expected. Maybe it's the fresh air, or maybe it's the satisfaction of feeding a family with only 4 ingredients and a prayer. As you chew, your mind drifts to what's next. Laundry, market day, or patching the hole in the roof with yet another piece of cloth. But that's later. For now, you chew. Slowly, peacefully. Then someone yells from the back room that the baby's awake. Of course she is. You rise with a sigh, already thinking about the midday meal. Maybe lentils if there's time. Maybe just leftover oats, fried in lard. You roll up your sleeves. Back to work.
You grab the churn from its corner in the kitchen. A heavy, splintery cylinder that always seems to leak slightly, no matter how tightly you wedge the lid. It's still early enough that the kitchen holds a kind of holy silence. The kind that lets you hear the creak of your own joints and the far-off cluck of a hen complaining about life. You settle onto the stool, wrap your shawl tight, and begin. Churn, churn, churn. It's a rhythm you know by heart. Hands gripping the dasher, arms working in slow, circular motions that turn warm cream into soft yellow butter. Ha-ha-dee eventually. If your arms don't give out first. Honestly, it's the 18th century equivalent of a gym workout. Except instead of tight abs, you get dinner and deltoids. Maybe. The cream, skimmed from the top of yesterday's milk, sloshes lazily. You added a bit of cold water to prevent it from becoming too thick too quickly, and as you churn, the kitchen begins to fill with the faintly sweet, lactic scent of what might become breakfast. Or at least a respectable spread for the dry bread no one wants but everyone eats. Over on the hearth, oats are bubbling. You stirred them together after your first round of chores. Water, oats, a pinch of salt. You didn't measure, of course, nobody does. Measurements are a luxury, like sleep or husbands who say thank you. You just eyeball it, as always, which usually works out fine. Usually. You check the pot and give it a stir with the big wooden spoon, so worn down at the handle it's more splinter than tool. A few lumps rise to the surface. You stab at them, muttering under your breath. Lumpy porridge means complaints, and you're not emotionally prepared for your youngest to declare it slimy again. Not after yesterday. Back to the butter. Churn. Churn. You can feel it thickening now, the texture changing, becoming more resistant. This is where you start to sweat. And yes, your back aches. And yes, the baby is crying again from the back room. But there's something satisfying about this moment. Watching the cream separate, the buttermilk pooling, the fat turning into golden, spreadable life. The irony? You don't get to eat much of it yourself. Butter's for the market, or the neighbor who trades you eggs, or your husband's lunch when he works with the estate crew. A pat of butter in his bread earns him more strength and possibly less grumbling from the overseer. So you wrap it in muslin and tuck it away, pretending you're not jealous of your own product. Historically speaking, butter in the 18th century wasn't just food, it was currency. Women like you bartered it for goods, offered it as a peace treaty, and sometimes even used it medicinally. Yes, you've absolutely smeared it on a burn once or twice. No, you don't recommend it. Meanwhile, the porridge is thickening nicely. You pour in a splash of the weak ale. It sounds odd, but the bitterness cuts the blandness, and the tiny bit of yeast makes it feel like luxury. You toss in a few dried apples, hoping they rehydrate before someone notices they're mostly peel. Just then, a sneeze from the hallway. Your oldest child stumbles in, hair a haystack, rubbing sleep from her eyes and muttering something about nightmares and unfair portions. You spoon porridge into a bowl, give her a crust of yesterday's bread, and sprinkle the smallest pinch of brown sugar on top. Not because you're generous, okay, maybe a little, but because you know that tiny bit of sweetness buys you 10 minutes of quiet. As she eats, you tip the churn, pour off the thin buttermilk into a jug. You'll use it in biscuits tomorrow, and scoop the butter into a shallow bowl. It glows like treasure. You knead it gently, shaping it into a lump with the back of a spoon, pressing out the last of the liquid. A fringe detail? Some women carved patterns into their butter. Swirls, flowers, family marks. You tried once. It looked like a frog fell on it. But still, the idea was noble. Historians still argue whether the physical labor of churning gave housewives more autonomy or just a more exhausting to-do list. Some argue butter making was an early entrepreneurial outlet, especially for unmarried women. Others say it was just another invisible task, praised only when it failed. You scrape the last of the butter into a crock and cover it with a damp cloth. Then you eye the leftover porridge in the pot and sigh. Not enough for lunch. Definitely not enough for dinner. You set some oats to soak for tomorrow and mentally start on the day's full menu. If the neighbor has cabbage, you'll trade for it. If the chickens lay, you might have an egg for supper. If not, you're back to lentils and hope. Churn. Churn. Still in your bones, even though you've stopped. The motion lingers. You wipe your hands on your apron and glance around the room. It's still early and already you're tired. Someone calls for you from outside. A neighbor maybe, or worse, a tax collector. You roll your eyes, check your face in a chipped piece of mirror, and walk out into the morning mist, ready to defend your butter with charm and thinly veiled sarcasm. You tighten your shawl and hoist the market basket onto your hip like it's a wayward child. Heavy, familiar, and full of attitude. It's still damp outside, the grass beaded with dew, and your boots squelch just enough to be irritating. The sun hangs low, not quite committed to shining, and you begin your trek toward the village square. You know this path by heart. The lopsided fence, the neighbor's goose that always seems to glare at you like you owe it money, and the shortcut behind the hedgerow that smells faintly of someone's failed compost attempt. You dodge a puddle, duck under a wayward tree branch, and rehearse your mental shopping list. Barley, onions, maybe a sliver of cheese if the vendor's in a forgiving mood. By the time you arrive, the square is alive with clatter and color. Wooden carts line the muddy road like a parade of desperation and ambition. Sellers hawk their wares with enthusiasm that borders on theatrical. Turnips, plump and mostly worm-free. Rabbits, fresh, or at least not stiff yet. Someone's shouting about eels. There's always someone shouting about eels. The air is thick with conflicting smells. Yeast from the baker's stall, sweat from the blacksmith's corner, and the unmistakable tang of unwashed wool. You nod at familiar faces. Mistress Green, red-faced and loud, is already deep into haggling with the fishmonger. Master Hobbs' cart is full of apples so shiny you suspect wax or witchcraft. Probably wax. You stop first at the grain seller, a stooped man with eyebrows like hedgerows. He eyes you warily as if you might try to seduce him for a discount. You don't. You simply offer last week's butter in trade and hope he isn't in one of his salted mood swings. He accepts after much grumbling, sliding a small sack of barley across the counter like it's contraband. You thank him and move on, tightening your grip on the basket. 1 stop down, 14 to go. You duck between stalls, scanning for anything that looks remotely fresh or affordable. Your fingers trail over a cabbage with suspicious brown spots, then a bunch of carrots still clinging to clumps of earth like they're homesick. A good housewife knows to look beyond appearances. Sometimes the ugliest root hides the best flavor. Sometimes it hides a worm, too. You live dangerously. You pause at the cheese seller's stall. The wheels of cheese are stacked like squat towers, ranging from snow-white soft cheeses to hunks so aged they probably have grandchildren. One, you swear, is making eye contact. You ask for a sliver, just a taste. And the seller, a widow with arms like bread loaves, narrows her eyes. "You'll not nibble unless you mean to buy," she says. You nod solemnly and fork over 2 copper coins, wincing as they part from your fingers. The wedge of cheese is sharp and creamy, with just enough funk to make it interesting. You slip it into your basket, feeling both triumphant and robbed. In the corner of the square, a group of women cluster near a table stacked with herbs and dried goods. You drift toward them, partly for the gossip, partly because you're hoping someone brought honey. You catch the tail end of a scandal. Someone's niece ran off with a baker's apprentice, or maybe it was the other way around. The women greet you with practiced smiles and sideways glances. You nod, lean in, and pretend to inspect a bunch of dried lavender while your ears do all the heavy lifting. Someone mentions a new stew recipe involving eels and dandelion greens. You suppress a shiver. Historically, markets like these were the social and economic lifeblood of communities. For women, they were equal parts grocery run and survival game. You didn't just buy food, you gathered intelligence, built alliances, negotiated invisible hierarchies. The best prices often went to those who shared gossip or flattered someone's terrible jam. A quirky tidbit? Some housewives carried hollowed-out walking sticks to sneak home an extra egg or two. You've considered it. You've even hollowed out a stick. But you also remember the time your cousin tried it and ended up with a yolky surprise mid-curtsy. Not worth the risk. You finish your rounds with a visit to the alewife stall. Her brew is cloudy, warm, and questionably legal. You trade a pinch of dried mint and get a small jug in return. You promise not to drink it all yourself. You will definitely drink it all yourself. By mid-morning, the square begins to thin. Children dart between carts, chasing each other with sticks. A man with a flute plays off-key near the well, earning a single coin and several grimaces. The fishmonger packs up with a curse about the flies. You make one last loop and tuck a bruised apple into your basket. Free because you smiled at someone's sullen teenage son. Historians still debate whether market culture empowered women or merely added another layer of invisible labor to their days. Some argue the freedom to barter and choose gave women agency. Others say the constant pressure to provide, impress, and economize turned even basic food shopping into mental gymnastics. You think it's both. You also think you're hungry. You head home, basket creaking, arms sore, and mind buzzing with meal plans. You consider how to stretch the cheese into 3 meals, how to disguise the cabbage spots, and whether the ale will be better warm or warmer. You pass the glaring goose again. It honks like it knows something. Probably about the stick trick. You ignore it. You return to your gate, already planning the midday stew. The house smells faintly of ash and oats, and as you step inside, your youngest yells that she accidentally spilled the flour. Of course she did. You set the basket down, sighing as you kick your boots off. Market day may be done, but now comes the real work. The flour is everywhere. It clings to the floor like ghost dust, coating the planks in a fine white film and drifting lazily through the air. Your youngest stands in the middle of the disaster, holding an empty sack and wearing a face of pure, unapologetic mischief. She looks like a tiny, defiant miller. You breathe in, carefully so as not to choke on airborne carbohydrates, and close your eyes. It's too early for dramatics, too late for mercy. You kneel, begin sweeping with your palm and a damp rag, muttering things you hope the Lord can't hear. The flour is wasted, of course it is. You had only a pound left, and now it's seasoning your floorboards. You'll have to make do with barley for the next few days, again. But it's not all bad. Barley's flexible. Boil it into a porridge, stir it into a stew, bake it into small, dense loaves that your children will complain about but eat anyway. And if you're very lucky, you might just coax it into a pudding. A sad pudding. But still, you sweep the mess into a pile, then out the door, where it blows off into the wind like a sad, starchy offering to the culinary gods. Inside, you wipe your hands on your apron and start thinking about lunch. It's always about the next meal. Like your life is just a series of meals you must invent out of whatever hasn't spoiled, spilled, or been eaten by rats. On the hearth, you reheat the morning's porridge, thinning it with a splash of water and adding the last of the dried peas. You stir in the questionable cabbage from the market, the bruised apple for sweetness, and a shake of salt. Is it delicious? No. Is it food? Technically. As it simmers, you tear bits from yesterday's barley loaf, hard as roof tiles, and soak them in the pot. That softens them mostly. Sometimes you have to threaten them with the back of the spoon. You hum to yourself while stirring. The baby coos. The world for a minute feels manageable. You dish out bowls and summon the children, who descend like a herd of mildly discontented goats. The oldest eyes the stew like it insulted her. The middle child pokes it with a spoon and asks if it's alive. You just raise an eyebrow and take the first bite yourself. Set the example. Pretend to enjoy it. Chew slowly and smile through the chew. Mainstream fact incoming. In the 18th century, barley was a staple in many households, especially those too poor for regular wheat. It was easy to grow, relatively resilient, and versatile enough to show up at every meal in some form. Barley broth, barley mash, barley bread. You start to wonder if you're becoming 40% barley yourself. And here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some superstitious cooks believed that singing while stirring food helped it cook better, or at least helped ward off foodborne spirits. You've tried it once or twice. The only thing it warded off was your eldest, who claimed your humming sounded cursed. Lunch passes in a blur of slurps, crumbs, and the occasional squabble over whose bowl was fuller. You mop up with the rest of the barley bread, pour weak ale into tin cups, and try not to resent how quickly they eat something you spent an hour coaxing into edible existence. Afterward, cleanup begins. Or as you think of it, meal prep in reverse. Bowls stacked, crumbs swept, soot knocked off the kettle. You scrape out the last of the stew into a crock for your husband's supper, and silently curse whoever invented hunger as a recurring event. You glance toward the pantry, or what passes for one. Really, it's a set of shelves behind a curtain, where you stash root vegetables, smoked odds and ends, and jars of preserved dreams. You take quick inventory. 2 onions, one of which has started to sprout. Half a wheel of turnip. A tin of lard, hardened like candle wax. A few shriveled beans. It's not a feast, but it's the building blocks of survival. You roll up your sleeves. Time to start prepping the evening meal. For protein, you pull out lentils. Blessed little legumes that keep forever and never complain. You soak them in water and throw in a bay leaf for drama. Into the pot goes a chopped onion, that wizened turnip, and a bit of yesterday's bacon fat, scraped from the bottom of the skillet. It's not meat, but it suggests meat, which is sometimes enough. And while the stew simmers, you tackle the firewood. Because of course you do. No one else will. Historians still argue whether 18th century domestic life was primarily an act of oppression or a form of power. Some say housewives had enormous control over the household economy and survival. Others argue that their labor was invisibilized, their exhaustion treated as background noise. You personally feel like a queen. A very tired, very hungry queen with ash on her nose and lentils in her hair. Outside, the afternoon drips by. You gather herbs from the garden, what's left of it, and sprinkle a bit of dried sage into the pot. It smells like someone else's house, someone wealthier. You set the table, a slab of wood really, but you do your best. Cups lined up, spoons clean. A cloth wiped across the surface with a kind of reverence. Not because anyone notices, but because it makes you feel like this matters. As the sun begins to dip, you ladle out the stew. The lentils have softened just right. The turnip is tender. You break the last of the bread and place it in the center, a peace offering for whoever finishes first and wants more. You sit, spoon in hand, and smile weakly at your little audience. Well, you say, who's ready for turnip surprise? Spoiler alert, the surprise is that it's mostly turnip. Evening rolls in without asking permission. The sky bruises from soft peach to smudged gray, and your candlelight dinner, yes, that's what we're calling it, flickers in the drafty corners of the room. The stew has been eaten, every last lentil. Even the turnip bits that got side-eyed at first were eventually devoured under your withering, it's this or nothing gaze. The children are quieter now, drowsy from warm food and a day of minor chaos. One is bent over a scrap of linen, pretending to sew like she's seen you do. Another is drawing stick figures in the fireplace soot. Your youngest is somewhere under the table, humming to herself and maybe, just maybe, eating crumbs off the floor. You'll check later, or not. You scrape the pot clean with your favorite spoon, the one with the burn mark on the handle from that time you forgot it on the hearth while chasing a mouse out of the flour bin. You run your fingers over the scar. Everything here has a story. The spoon, the table, even the ceiling beam with the notch where your husband accidentally swung a hammer instead of a nail. You rinse the pot with a bit of boiled water and vinegar, your version of kitchen alchemy, and set it upside down near the hearth to dry. The fire has died to embers, just enough to keep the room from slipping into frostbite. You toss on a few splinters of kindling and whisper encouragement. It pops and crackles like it's trying its best. Then comes your quiet ritual, portioning tomorrow's rations. You take what's left of the onion, wrap it in a strip of cloth. The lard tin gets sealed with a worn cork. You stack the barley cakes you made earlier, dense, disc-shaped, and roughly the size of a toddler's palm. No one loves them. Everyone eats them. As the last bit of firelight dances, you lean against the table and take a moment just to breathe. Your back aches. Your hands smell like turnip and ash. Your stomach is fullish. You survived another day. Time for the best part of the evening, the leftovers game. Not what's left to eat. Heaven help you, there's none of that. But what's left to repurpose? The cabbage leaf that didn't make it into lunch? You'll use that to polish the stove. The apple peel? Dry it by the fire for a weak tea tomorrow. The bones from last week's chicken? Still hanging from a hook. Might get another broth out of it if you flirt with the gods. Mainstream fact here? Waste was not an option in the 18th century kitchen. Housewives were the original zero-waste warriors, long before it was trendy. Every crust, peel, and bone had an afterlife. Soup stocks, animal feed, garden mulch. Even eggshells could be ground into powder and used as a mild abrasive, or occasionally as medicine if you were feeling brave or reckless. And a quirky tidbit? Some women use stale bread soaked in milk as an impromptu poultice for bruises. Others believed pressing it to their forehead could cure headaches. It can't, but hey, when your options are bread or bloodletting, you make weird choices. You reach for your recipe scrapbook. Not that it's a book exactly. It's more like a pile of folded parchment wedged into an old almanac. Your handwriting is half legible, half sorcery. There's a blot where someone spilled molasses. A burn mark from an overly ambitious pudding. The margins are filled with notes like "do not repeat, fatal gas," and "needs more time," possibly also talent. You flip through looking for inspiration. Something that doesn't involve turnips, or barley, or turnips. Your eyes land on a note from your cousin about using mashed peas to stretch a meat pie filling. You laugh under your breath. "Meat pie," she says, like it's something you just have. Still, the idea sparks something. If you mash some dried peas, mix an onion, leftover bacon fat, maybe a splash of ale, you could call it a pie. Technically, if no one asks too many questions. Historians still argue whether women's recipe records should be considered historical documents. Some view them as domestic ephemera, personal, unimportant. Others argue these scribbled, stained, and chaotic creations are the truest diaries of survival and creativity. You think those historians should spend a week feeding 5 people on onions, barley, and spite? Then get back to you. You tuck the recipe pages away and look toward the shelf where the good dishes live. Not porcelain. Don't flatter yourself. Just a chipped blue bowl and a plate with a pattern that might be flowers or maybe just mold. You clean them anyway with care and set them aside for Sunday. Maybe if the market smiles on you, you'll find eggs. maybe even a bit of jam. You check the window. The last light is fading. Outside, the world is quiet except for the occasional owl or neighbor's cow. You pull the shutter closed with a creak and secure it with a wooden peg that's definitely older than two of your children. Inside, the room is small and warm and full of breath. Your husband finally trudges through the door, his coat soaked through, smelling of earth and sweat and smoke. You hand him the last of the stew without words. He grunts. You grunt back. It's almost romantic. As he eats, you sit and stitch a tear in the youngest's apron. The fire hisses low. The children are dozing in a tangle on the floor, one still clutching a stick figure masterpiece smeared with soot and dreams. And for a moment, in this quiet, half-lit world, you almost believe in magic. Or at least in the ability to do it all again tomorrow. Sleep should come easy after a day like this. Your body certainly demands it. Every joint sighs, every muscle slumps, and your eyelids tug downward like laundry on a line. But your mind, no. Your mind has other plans. You're tucked into your lumpy straw mattress, the one that pokes your ribs unless you shift just so. One of the children snores gently beside you, limbs flung out like a starfish mid-meltdown. The air smells faintly of cabbage and smoke, and the lavender sachet you hung near the window 3 years ago and keep pretending still has scent. Outside, an owl hoots. Inside, your thoughts chatter. What will you cook tomorrow? Is the barley going to stretch through Thursday? Did you remember to seal the flour tin? Or are the mice staging a coup as you lie here? You sigh and roll onto your side. The blanket is scratchy wool, hand-woven, patched in 3 corners and chewed slightly at one edge from when the cat had opinions about being ignored. In this quiet moment, the day's menu replays like a parade of beige, porridge, lentil stew, barley bread. A symphony of mildly edible in 3 dull movements. And yet, you're still here? Still full enough, still managing. Mainstream history likes to talk about kings, battles, revolutions. But your revolutions are smaller and quieter. They happen when you manage to cook a halfway decent pie out of mashed peas and kitchen desperation, or when you stretch a pound of flour into something resembling breakfast and lunch. You're not storming the Bastille, you're storming the root cellar. There's a phrase from a neighbor you think about sometimes. Cooking is just problem solving with a side of hunger. And really, isn't it? The fire's gone out by now, leaving only the lingering warmth in the bricks. Your feet press into the mattress, searching for a warm pocket among the lumps. The child beside you kicks in their sleep. You pretend not to mind. It's comforting, in a chaos-adjacent sort of way. Let's wander, just for a moment, into a dreamy pantry of the 18th-century Housewives' food mind. Picture the ingredients not as simple things, but as characters, each with their own personality. Barley is the stoic one, ever-present, never fancy. Onions are your scrappy sidekicks, teary but loyal. Turnips are... Well, turnips are the coworkers no one invited to the party, but they showed up anyway, and now you have to be polite. Now add lentils, the quiet intellectuals. Underrated, subtle, never flashy. Peas, the class clowns of the legume world. Salt, the drama queen. When she's missing, everyone notices. And butter? Butter is the rich cousin who rarely visits but sends extravagant letters. Sometimes you see her at a feast and you remember how smooth life could be. You reach toward the small shelf near your bed and pick up a cloth bundle. Inside, your emergency stash. Not food, no, you're not that rich, but spices. A paper twist of dried thyme. A tiny jar of caraway seeds, a pinch of nutmeg, gifted by a friend who had access to better markets. They smell like ambition, or at least like the memory of a feast. You remember when you used the nutmeg on Christmas, just a shaving, just enough to make the boiled pudding feel festive instead of what it was. You close your eyes, inhaling the faded scent. Your stomach grumbles, either in protest or nostalgia, hard to tell. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. Some women in your position used rose water or orange flower water, not for flavor, but for status. A splash in the porridge said, "I may be poor, but I have taste." Even if the rest of the meal was mostly disappointment and hope. You drift for a while in this scent-swirled half-sleep. In your dream, you're preparing a feast with actual butter, actual meat, and no turnips. There's a pie with golden crust, and inside is, oh look, it's lentils again. Figures. You chuckle softly, which stirs the child beside you. A small hand pats your cheek, then drops like a sleepy anchor. You pull the blanket up to her chin. You shift again. The straw mattress rustles like dry grass. Your legs ache, not with pain exactly, but with the memory of motion. You think about tomorrow's breakfast. There's just enough barley to make gruel again. If you're feeling fancy, maybe stir in a spoon of jam. What's left of it anyway? You wonder if the children even remember what real jam tastes like. Strawberries and sugar, plump and syrupy. Or has it always been the watered-down, barely sweetened version you've rationed for 3 winters? Historians still argue whether the simplicity of 18th century food meant a healthier diet or just a lack of choice. Some say housewives like you had a naturally balanced intake. Grains, legumes, vegetables, far better than today's processed meals. Others argue the lack of variety and chronic malnourishment led to stunted growth, dental disasters, and general misery. You feel it's probably both. Healthy-ish, but hungry. You murmur a prayer, half thankful, half wishful, and close your eyes. Your mind keeps listing ingredients you don't have. Butter, eggs, honey, cheese. Real meat. Wine. Sugar not measured by the teaspoon. A lemon. Just one. You once had one. You think. Sleep takes longer than it should because even when your body is ready, your stomach and brain like to gossip. Eventually, though, it comes. The soft pull of exhaustion, the slow-motion tumble into rest. You dream, of course, about food. About a table groaning with roasted fowl, steaming bread, pies sweet enough to make your teeth ache. You take a bite. It tastes like lentils again. Even in your dreams, you economize. You wake before the sun. Again. Not because you want to. Let's not pretend this is some inspirational morning routine. But because the baby has decided your ribcage makes an ideal mattress, and your bladder has finally lost its duel with last night's watery gruel. Outside, it's still ink dark. Inside, the air is cold enough to see your breath if you whisper too hard. You don't want to move. Every joint protests. Your hair is a bird's nest, and your feet have become strangers. But there's barley to boil, ash to sweep, and a family to feed. So you sit up, swing your legs over the edge of the straw mattress, and begin the day with a heroic stretch and a muttered insult to whoever invented mornings. The hearth is dead, again, and you poke around in the ashes for signs of life. Nothing. You sigh, grab the flint and steel, and begin the sacred fire dance. Spark, hope, fail, curse, repeat. After 5 tries and 1 moment of existential dread, a tiny flame flickers into being. You coax it gently, whispering sweet nothings and feeding it curls of dried straw and shavings. Finally, it catches. The morning begins in earnest. You fetch the barley and water, measuring by eye like every generation before you. There's no written recipe for gruel, just inherited instinct and the lingering judgment of your grandmother's ghost. A pinch of salt, a dash of dried herb, and the slow, meditative stir of the wooden spoon. It doesn't taste like much, it never does. But it fills stomachs, and right now, that's the only metric of success that matters. Your children rise one by one, sleepy-eyed and rumpled. One trips over a stool. One is already crying about shoes. You hand out the bowls like communion wafers and manage not to roll your eyes when someone asks if there's honey. Only in our dreams, you mutter. Mainstream fact. Breakfast in the 18th century was rarely a grand affair. For working-class households, it was functional. Bread, porridge, cold leftovers. Sometimes beer. Yes, beer. Because water wasn't always trustworthy, and nothing says good morning like a pint of safety ale before chores. Today, however, there's no beer, just well-boiled water and optimism. You finish your own bowl in a few bites, already thinking about the rest of the day. There's a market 2 villages over. If you leave soon, you might get the good fish before they sell out. But that means hauling 2 children and bartering with the fishmonger who insists on flirting and always smells vaguely of herring and disappointment. Still, you're low on salt and completely out of carrots, which were supposed to last until Thursday. And heaven help you. But if you have to eat turnip stew again without a single speck of orange in it, you may just walk into the sea. So you begin the preparations. Scrub hands, braid hair, wrap the baby tight, and slip into your serviceable, read, least hole-ridden, overgown. Your eldest, bless her soul, volunteers to carry the basket. She may be 12 going on tyrant, but she has strong arms and a sharp tongue, which are both assets at the market. You step out into the chill morning air, your boots crunching on frost-laced dirt. The world smells like chimney smoke, wet leaves, and a faint promise of spring, even though spring is clearly still drunk and sleeping in. The journey takes over an hour on foot. Along the way, you chat with another housewife who shares gossip like it's currency. Her brother's wife swears by mashed chestnuts and bread dough. You store the idea for later, though chestnuts are a luxury and you're still mastering barely edible. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some housewives use chestnut flour as a wheat substitute, especially in regions where wheat was either too expensive or just didn't grow well. Chestnuts were ground into powder, mixed with water or milk, and used in everything from flatbread to pancakes. They were sweet, filling, and, in some circles, fancied as a dessert ingredient when combined with dried fruits. You arrive at the market just as the fishmonger is unpacking his wares. You give him your best, "I'm too tired to flirt, but will fake it for sardines" look. And after some light banter, he wraps you a small parcel of sprats and throws in an extra herring for the little one. She rewards him by drooling. You trade a scrap of wool cloth for a small wedge of cheese, hard, sharp, and glorious, and find a handful of carrots in the back of a cart, tucked beside some suspicious-looking parsnips. You're tempted, but you remember what happened last time. Parsnips lie, they look like fun and taste like betrayal. On the way home, you mentally plan dinner, sprat and onion stew with barley, carrot slices for garnish. Aesthetic is important, even if no one but your own hungry family will see it. And maybe a shaving of cheese over the top, if you're feeling decadent. Historians still argue whether markets empowered 18th century women, or merely reminded them of their limited agency. Some claim the act of barter and selection was a rare form of control and autonomy. Others point to the heavy social scrutiny, constant gendered expectations, and male-dominated pricing systems that made every purchase a psychological chess match. You feel that. You really do. Every choice is a compromise. Every indulgence is a negotiation. Back home, the children swarm as you unpack. You ration everything like a queen distributing treasure. 2 carrots for stew, 1 for snack. Cheese gets hidden, no exceptions. The sprats are eyed with suspicion but accepted. You've trained them well, or at least starved them strategically. You start dinner early. The fire is strong today, and the room fills with the rich scent of fish, onion, and bubbling grain. It smells almost like a celebration. Almost. One child asks if it's someone's birthday. You tell them, yes, it's the birthday of not having turnip stew. They cheer. You smile. By the time the sprat stew hits the table, it's dark again. Not just outside, where the sky has collapsed into its usual winter navy, but inside, too, where only the flicker of firelight and a single tallow candle offer resistance to the early evening gloom. You ladle out steaming portions, careful to distribute the precious carrot slices like sacred relics. 1 per bowl, maybe 2 if someone looks particularly withered or pitiful. The children dig in immediately. No one asks for seconds yet, they know better. The cheese remains hidden for a more strategic deployment. Like all good military leaders, you save your finest weapon for when morale starts to drop. As you sit, sipping your portion slowly, partly to enjoy it, mostly to delay being hungry again in an hour, your mind drifts to that strange cookbook you saw once, hand-copied, passed around from neighbor to neighbor like some holy text. It had recipes for things you'd never heard of. Syllabub, which sounded like a sneeze, and chicken and chocolate sauce. which frankly felt like an act of culinary rebellion. Who even has chocolate? You, however, specialize in a different genre. Food from nothing. The culinary equivalent of turning rags into royalty. Pea soup thickened with yesterday's bread crusts. Leek tops boiled with barley until they taste almost like a real vegetable. The famous eggless cake made from dried fruit and hope. You start thinking about tomorrow again. It never ends, this cycle. Cook, serve, scrape, plan, repeat. Food isn't just nutrition. It's strategy, identity, proof that you're managing to keep everyone upright. You're not just feeding mouths, you're feeding life. Mainstream historical fact time. Cookbooks in the 18th century were largely written by or for upper-class women and professional male chefs. The average housewife, especially in the countryside or lower classes, wouldn't have access to these. Recipes were passed down orally through example or scribbled in personal notebooks, if you were lucky enough to be literate. But you've got your own internal cookbook now, tattooed into muscle memory. A pinch here, a handful there, stir until it looks right. No parchment required. After dinner, the children clear the bowls with minimal fuss. One of them even wipes the table, probably angling for a bigger breakfast. You light another candle and pull out your sewing, squinting to catch the stitches before the wax burns too low. The room is quiet now. Just the occasional crackle of the fire, the rhythmic creak of your chair, and the low hum of a lullaby someone hums without realizing it. Then comes the moment, the quiet little miracle you've been saving. You go to the shelf, unwrap the cheese wedge with reverence, and slice off thin slivers. Not too much. Not enough to be noticed by the cheese itself. Just enough to hand around with a whisper of luxury. The children squeal, even the older ones who pretend to be jaded. It tastes sharp, real, and glorious, like the opposite of turnips. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some 18th century housewives made their own cheese using everything from sour milk to rennet extracted from a calf's stomach. It wasn't glamorous, it was lumpy, rustic, and often covered in muslin, so coarse it doubled as a dishcloth. But it was theirs. Homemade dairy products were both pride and survival. Your pride today? Just having cheese. No calf stomach required. Later, as the children drift off one by one, you linger by the hearth, poking at the coals and letting your thoughts simmer like soup. You remember the neighbor who once told you that mealtime is a performance, that every plate, every bowl is a stage, and your audience is always a little too honest. If they like it, you'll know. If not, well, there's always sarcasm and feigned choking. Tonight, applause, or at least contented chewing. A full belly is its own standing ovation. Historians still argue whether food scarcity shaped cultural resilience or just trauma. Did these centuries of making do forge a certain kind of strength? Or were they simply a daily grind that left people too tired to dream big? You suspect the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Strength and tiredness. Grit in both the bread and the soul. You clean the last dishes in silence, scraping them clean with a cloth, rinsing with precious heated water, then drying them by the fire until they're warm to the touch. Your hands are red and cracked, but familiar. These are hands that have kneaded, peeled, stirred, and soothed. Hands that have fed 5 mouths, 6 if you count the neighbor's youngest, who always accidentally arrives at dinner time. Tomorrow's meals begin forming in your mind already. You'll need to soak the beans. You might try boiling the barley with onion skins to see if that actually deepens the flavor, like old Nan claimed. And if you're lucky, if the chickens cooperate, there might even be an egg. Just one, but enough to turn breakfast into a celebration. You blow out the candle, leaving only embers and soft shadows. In the darkness, you feel that familiar tug, exhaustion woven into purpose. You don't have much, but you have enough. And in this century, for someone like you, that's no small victory. You lie down, pulling the blanket over your shoulders, and listen to the sounds of the sleeping house. A sniffle, a sigh, a cat leaping onto a bench. The pop of a log splitting softly in the hearth. You smile into the dark. For now, everyone is fed. For tonight, that is everything. The morning creeps in again, quietly, like it's trying not to wake you. But you wake anyway, because that's what you do. It's not the rooster. He's late again, that lazy, feathered fraud. It's the ache in your hips, the pull of another day's list unfolding behind your eyelids, and the first small sound from the baby. Half whimper, half hiccup. You rise slowly, careful not to jostle the warmth beside you. The fire miraculously has clung to a single ember, glowing like a secret. You nudge it to life with the devotion of a priest. Some days this hearth is your only altar. There's no barley today, at least not enough for everyone. You do the mental math. You could stretch it with bread, but the bread's nearly gone too. You'll have to get creative again. You already know what the answer is, even before you look at the pantry. Peas. Dried, dusty, uninspired peas. They've been sitting in a linen sack at the back of the shelf, judging you for weeks. But today, they'll have their moment. You set them to soak in warm water, wondering if it's possible to make a bowl of peas feel like a real breakfast, and not just punishment. You add a bay leaf for courage. Mainstream fact? Peas were a staple in 18th century diets, especially among the working classes. Dried peas lasted for months, even years if stored properly, and were one of the few proteins available to the poor during lean times. They were used in soups, stews, porridges, even mashed and fried into early versions of pea cakes. You mash yours with a little lard and onion, forming rough patties that sizzle faintly on the iron pan. They're ugly, but they smell, surprisingly, like something that might be eaten on purpose. When the children wake, they stare suspiciously at the greenish discs on their plates. The youngest pokes one like it might poke back. You shrug and say, "It's breakfast," or it's wishful thinking. A few bites in, and they're asking for more. Victory. After breakfast, you inspect your remaining stores. It's not pretty. The bread is down to a single misshapen hunk, hard as guilt. You've got turnips, naturally, a half onion, and just enough salt to keep things from tasting like wet disappointment. The cheese is still hidden, emergency only, but the real issue is fat. You're nearly out of lard. You sigh. It's time to do what you were hoping to avoid. Render more. There's a small chunk of pork fat in the cold bin out back, a gift from your neighbor in exchange for mending his daughter's torn apron. It's not much, but it'll do. Rendering fat is one of those chores that feels more alchemy than cooking. You cut the pale, waxy block into pieces, toss them into the iron pot, and let the fire do its slow, greasy work. It bubbles and hisses, releasing that unmistakable smell, something between bacon and candle smoke. It's tedious, it's messy, it's also essential. Quirky tidbit for the day. In some regions, housewives reuse the leftover cracklings, the crispy bits left after rendering lard, as a treat, frying them up with onion and flour to make crackling cakes. Not fancy. Definitely crunchy, but indulgent in their own peculiar, squeaky way. You consider saving your own cracklings for supper, maybe mixed with mashed turnips, maybe disguised under a layer of enthusiasm. While the fat renders, you tackle the bread situation. The loaf is too stale for slicing, so you soak it in warm water and mash it into a thick paste with herbs and a dash of vinegar. This will become dinner. Pottage. Not the exciting kind, like those stew recipes that call for saffron and raisins and other mythical ingredients, but your kind. Turnip thickened, bread-based, and optimistic. You wonder sometimes about those other recipes. The ones that talk about roast quail and custards layered in silver bowls. There's a fantasy in them, like a bedtime story written by people who never had to boil water twice just to make it drinkable. Historians still argue whether cookbooks from the period reflected actual meals or idealized food meant to reinforce class distinction. Was it instructional or aspirational? Were they real guides or just edible daydreams printed on borrowed ink? You'd bet on the latter. When the lard is finally strained and cooling in its clay pot, you feel something close to pride. You've extended your ability to cook for another week. Maybe two. You store the cracklings in a cloth-lined bowl, Wrap the pot in cloth and stack it beside the cheese in your secret stash corner. Your treasury of calories. Lunch today is thin soup and a slice of re-warmed pea cake for anyone still hungry. The kids whine briefly, then remember the cheese exists and fall silent, chewing with faint hope in their eyes. Later in the day, you pull your daughter aside and show her how to check the potatoes for rot. It's a slow task involving a bucket of water and a sharp nose. Any that float or stink are thrown out, which unfortunately is a growing number. You keep 3 good ones for tomorrow. The rest get buried in the compost with a little prayer. That's your other role besides cook, cleaner, medic, tailor, counselor, and occasional fish negotiator. You're the steward of future food. What you save today becomes what you might eat next week. Every decision in your kitchen echoes forward in time like a whispered forecast. And so, as the sun lowers again and the turnip bread pottage simmers away, you sit beside the hearth, cracking dried herbs between your fingers and watching the dust catch in the firelight. It's not glamour, it's not grandeur, but it is survival. And sometimes it even flirts with satisfaction. Dinner is eaten with gratitude and minimal complaint. The cracklings, added in secret, add crunch and illusion of flavor depth. The children notice something is different but can't quite place it. You tell them it's magic and leave it at that. As they wash up, you run your fingers through your hair and wonder what tomorrow will bring. Another visit to the neighbor's garden? A miracle egg from the hen? Or just another dance with turnips and tricks? You smile anyway. You've made it through the day and everyone's stomach is not empty. You'll call that a win. You wake up to the familiar chill of the room. Your bed is warmer than the air, but only by a fraction. The light that filters through the grimy window is weak and gray, signaling another gloomy day. There's no rush to rise, but you do, because there's work to be done, as always. The children are still asleep, wrapped in layers of old quilts and straw-filled pillows, their little bodies cradled by the remnants of last night's warmth. You linger a moment, listening to their even breathing, unbothered by the 1,000 worries you carry every day. It's a small luxury, these few minutes of peace. Your own stomach growls, almost like a reminder that your job as a housewife is never truly done. Breakfast beckons. You slide out from under the covers and wrap your shawl around your shoulders. The floor is cold beneath your bare feet, but you've long since stopped minding. The fire awaits. The kindling's next to the hearth, dry enough for an early start. You light the match with the quiet care of someone who has learned that fire, much like life, is a fickle companion. The first spark catches immediate and welcome. The fire begins to crackle as you gently add wood, coaxing the flame into something more substantial. You walk over to your pantry trying not to look at the sparse shelves. There's still some dried fish left, though it's getting stale. The bread is nearly gone. The children won't be satisfied with just barley today, it's too bland. You consider the possibility of leftovers, what's left of last night's pottage maybe, stretched out with a bit of the remaining cheese or those last shriveled potatoes that haven't quite made it into the stew pot. You find the last of the barley. It's more than enough for breakfast, just barely. The rest can be used for the midday meal if you stretch it with a little dried herb. Maybe some onions if you're lucky. But breakfast must be quick. You pour the barley into the pot and add water, giving it a good stir. It doesn't make much of a sound, just the soft swish of grains in the water. You let it simmer, watching the way it slowly thickens. The fire crackles in the background, warming your face and hands, though the air still feels like it's pulling the heat from your bones. The children begin to stir in their beds, some louder than others. The youngest cries for you, her voice a high-pitched wail that stabs through the quiet. You move toward her, soothing her as best you can. You tell her that breakfast will be ready soon, and she quiets, at least for a moment. As you finish stirring the barley, you scrape the bottom of the pot for the last bits of scraps. There's something about cooking over a fire that makes you more conscious of every last morsel, every drop of liquid, and every speck of food. You're always aware of what's left and what could be salvaged. You know the kids are hungry. You know they won't settle for just porridge today. And so you find your last chunk of cheese, already more than a little hardened, and grate it into the barley. You stir it in slowly, letting the heat of the porridge soften it into gooey, slightly savory bliss. It's not much, but it will be enough. It has to be. The house slowly comes alive with the movement of children shuffling their feet to the hearth, yawning and stretching, their faces flushed with sleep. They gather around the table, eager but still unsure of what you've made. The smell is simple but good. There's nothing better than cheese melting into hot porridge, filling the air with the promise of something more. You set the bowls before them, carefully measuring out just enough for each one. You don't have a lot of anything. There's no more honey to drizzle, no jam to spread. Just the cheese and the barley. Still, the kids don't complain. They never do, not really. Not when they're hungry anyway. You sit down with your own bowl. The porridge is rich and warm in your mouth, the saltiness of the cheese cutting through the blandness of the barley. It's not gourmet. It's not even good, in the way some people would define it. But it's food, and it's enough. As you chew, you think about yesterday's trip to the market. You managed to sell the leftover fish, what little was left after you fed the children and salted the rest, and picked up a few onions and some dried beans. The onions were a luxury you didn't expect. If you're lucky, there'll be more at the market in the coming days. You wonder if you'll ever get used to this cycle of waking, cooking, eating, and doing it all over again. You've known this rhythm for years now, and yet it never quite feels normal. It feels like a heavy, perpetual turn of the wheel. And sometimes that wheel is slow and grinding, and other times it rolls forward a little faster than you'd like. Historians still argue whether the daily routine of 18th century housewives ever became second nature or if it always felt like a slog. Some claim that women were deeply attuned to the natural world, able to read the seasons and weather to predict and prepare. Others suggest that for many, the weight of daily chores and the constant pressure to provide never truly allowed for comfort, only survival. You feel both. There's the deep rhythm of your days, the way your body knows exactly when to stir the pot, when to check the fire, when to sweep the floor. But there's also the weight of the tasks themselves, the way each day blends into the next, a relentless march toward the same horizon, always just a bit further than you can reach. When the meal is finished and the children are off to play, or argue depending on the day, you begin to clean the hearth and tidy up the kitchen. You scrape the porridge pot clean, rinse the bowls in the cold water that's left, and hang the dishcloth out to dry. It's not much of a victory, but it's something. Another day, another set of small triumphs. You take a moment to stand back and look at the fire. The warmth on your skin feels good, like a small but necessary indulgence. The flame flickers and spits, and for just a second, you think about how much of your life has been spent in its light. You imagine that this is how the generations before you must have felt. Every woman with a fire in her hearth, struggling with the same tasks, the same desires for a little peace. And then the baby cries again, pulling you out of your reverie. There's always something else to tend to, always more to do. But for now, you pause, take a deep breath, and get back to work. Because tomorrow, the same cycle will begin again. The days are starting to blend together. Not that it matters much. Time, when you live it in pieces, doesn't arrive in neat packages, and it doesn't follow the clock. You know the rhythm of it, the long stretch of daylight, the fleeting evening, the crawl of a long night, where the sound of the wind scratching at the windows is as much a part of you as the hum of the fire in the hearth. You rise early as usual. The house is quiet still, save for the occasional groan of the wooden beams settling in their own long sleep. The children are tucked in, most of them still dreaming of things you can never quite remember. You move slowly, your body aching from yesterday's efforts, but you push it aside. There's no time for fatigue today. It's the turn of the season. The mornings are a little colder now, and there's a certain heaviness in the air that tells you the leaves will soon fall, and the world will turn its attention to a harsher sort of survival. The food you've been storing for months, the potatoes, the carrots, the turnips, are running low. You begin to think about the animals that might be slaughtered soon, if only to make sure the family doesn't starve in the coming months. But it's too early yet. You'll have to wait, though you wish you didn't. This morning, the fire is quick to catch. The embers from yesterday still cling to life, their orange glow more persistent than usual. The warmth spreads quickly as the pot boils, and you find yourself silently thankful for the consistency of this small ritual. There's a comfort in knowing that the fire will always be there, and that you can always count on it to give you the heat you need, the boiling water, the steady simmer of whatever you've decided will be breakfast today. You stand at the hearth, a bit lost in thought, staring at the flame, when you hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Soft at first, but then louder, closer. It's the youngest, dragging her blanket behind her, her eyes heavy with the weight of sleep. "Morning, love," you say gently. She looks up at you with a sleep-heavy smile and climbs onto the chair beside you, still rubbing her eyes. The quiet moments with the children are always a reminder that, for them, this world is still new. They haven't yet learned the unspoken weight of every choice you make, every meal, every stretch of patience you offer. As you stir the pot, you think of yesterday's meal, a rather simple affair of leftover barley and a few dried beans you'd saved for just this sort of moment. It wasn't fancy. It never is. But it was filling. The children didn't complain, and neither did you. They've learned by now that complaints are useless when there's no food to offer but what's available. You'll need to use the last of the onions today. They're starting to soften, their skins shriveled and thin. You slice one in half and add it to the pot, knowing full well that it's mostly for the smell more than the flavor. The other vegetables have long since been used up. There's not enough to make a hearty stew, but you can stretch what's left. Always, always stretch. The children slowly drift into the kitchen, drawn by the scent of cooking. They crowd around, looking hopeful, hands reaching for whatever they can get. Their eyes scan the pot, and you know they can tell that it's nothing special. The promise of something more has yet to be fulfilled, but their hunger doesn't care about the difference between dream and reality. "Is it ready, Mama?" the eldest asks, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Almost," you reply, stirring the mixture. You glance out the window at the overcast sky, the faintest promise of rain in the air. It's not enough to give you a sense of urgency, but it is enough to remind you of the work ahead. After breakfast, there's cleaning to be done, and then a trip to the market if you can scrape together a few coins. You might even try to sell some of your homemade candles, though you've always been skeptical about their value. But sometimes you have to try. As the children sit at the table, waiting with quiet anticipation, you put the finishing touches on the meal. A bit of lard to enrich the flavor, a sprinkle of salt, and a few dried herbs from the garden. It's not much, but it's what you have. When they eat, you watch them. They devour the food without hesitation, faces lighting up at the simple joy of a warm meal. They chew and slurp, their eyes bright with the pleasure of a belly that isn't aching with hunger. For a moment, it almost feels like a luxury. It's not a feast. It's not a grand banquet of roasted meats and fine wines, but it's enough. You sit with them, savoring your own portion in silence. There's something grounding in these moments, something that ties you to this history, this centuries-old tradition of survival. The quiet morning meals, the small victories, the unspoken understanding that no matter how hard it gets, you'll make it through. You always do. Historians still argue whether the constant frugality of housewives led to a kind of emotional numbness, an inability to dream beyond the daily grind, or if in some strange way it fostered an intimate connection to the earth, to nature's cyclical patterns. You think it might be a little of both. On the one hand, the sheer repetition could wear anyone down. On the other, the constant reliance on the earth's gifts, small though they were, could make you feel for a moment like a part of something much larger than yourself. You finish your meal and stand, wiping your hands on your apron. It's time to get to work. There's laundry to hang, a rug to beat, a floor to scrub. But for now, you pause. You take a deep breath and smile just a little. The house is warm, the children are fed, and for the moment, that's enough. The day ahead may be uncertain, but you've seen it through so many times before. And somehow, you'll see it through again. The afternoon is settled in quietly, the low hum of the world outside the house gently reminding you of the passing hours, inside, the children have returned to their noisy play, filling the space with sounds that seem as much a part of this house as the walls themselves. You move between them, your hands busy, scrubbing, folding, sorting, always with the sense that the work never quite stops. You glance at the window, the soft light of the day slowly dimming as the clouds gather thicker outside. It's one of those gray days where you know the rain will come, just a matter of when. The soil outside is already soft and ready to drink, and you feel a small pang of worry in your chest. There's more work to do before the rain hits, more preparations to make. Tomorrow's stew may require more than you have. But today is a day for laundry. It's an endless task, but necessary. You trudge out to the line, the wet linen swaying in the breeze as you hang them with a practiced hand. The wind is cold today, cutting through the thin fabric of your dress, reminding you that winter isn't as far off as you'd like to believe. You try not to think too much about that, about the months of scarcity ahead, about the slow burn of cold nights and the dwindling food stores. Your fingers ache as you stretch to hang the heavier sheets, the wind tugging at the linen as if to hurry you along. You push back your hair, wind-swept and loose, and get back to the task at hand. There's always something that needs to be done. Always. By the time you return inside, the rain has started. The first drops fall softly like whispers before the heavens open wide and the storm pours down. You listen to the steady drumming against the roof, and for a moment it feels as if time has stopped, as if the world is holding its breath. You wonder briefly if you've earned a break. But you know better. The children are inside now, crowding the fire and watching you with those eyes that always seem to carry so many unasked questions. You set to work again, pulling out the remains of yesterday's stew to heat over the fire, adding what little vegetables you have left, and a handful of dried beans for good measure. It's not much, but you've learned how to stretch food, how to make it seem like something more than just survival. You taste the broth as it warms, and it's not nearly as rich as it could be. You could use more fat. You could use more of anything, really, but this is what you have. Historians still argue whether meals in the 18th century were ever a source of joy for those in the lower classes, or if they were simply a necessity. Were these meals a chance for families to gather and share, to revel in what they could find together? Or were they just moments between the grinding effort of keeping the house going? You wonder if the taste of food changes when it's eaten with family. When the work of the day is done and there's nothing left but the simple pleasure of a meal shared. You wonder if there's a different flavor when the meal is not just about filling your stomach, but about making it through the day, again and again. The children settle around the table as you spoon the stew into their bowls. The smallest grins, her face lighting up at the sight of food, though she doesn't yet realize that it's nothing more than warmed-over leftovers with a few new beans tossed in for good measure. They slurp and eat without complaint, and for that, you are grateful. You sit with them, sharing the same thin meal. The fire crackles behind you and the rain keeps its steady rhythm outside. A reminder that the world moves forward regardless of the work you do or the quiet sacrifices made behind closed doors. As they finish their bowls, you get up to clean the dishes. The evening sets in, darker now, and you think about the tasks ahead. You've still got to fix the small hole in the roof, patch a tear in the trousers, and sort through the dried herbs you've been saving. There's always something. But for now, you allow yourself the luxury of the quiet, of the stillness that only comes when the day is done and there's nothing left but to breathe. It's an odd, fleeting thing. This quiet after the storm. This small moment of peace before tomorrow's challenges arrive. Tomorrow will be another long day. Another round of early mornings, fire stoking, and food stretching. There will be more rain, more work to be done. But for tonight, you sit in the dim light of the hearth. The children's laughter soft in the background, and for a brief moment, it's enough. Tomorrow, the world will start again, but for now, there's only this moment. The night has come, and with it, a chill that seeps into the bones despite the warm glow of the fire. The hearth crackles and hisses, keeping the room at a comfortable warmth, but it can only do so much against the cold of the stone walls and the creeping dampness that comes with the season. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders as you sit near the fire, letting its warmth settle into you. There's something deeply comforting about the way the heat radiates from the flames, chasing away the cold but not the tiredness that lingers in your muscles. You watch the flames dance, their erratic movements like reflections of the past. The days of scarcity, the long nights when you wondered if tomorrow's food would come, or if your strength would hold out just one more day. But you've always kept moving forward, one task at a time, one meal after another. There's no room to dwell on what you can't control. Tonight, the house is quieter than usual. The children are already tucked in, their small bodies curled up under the quilts that still smell faintly of herbs and fresh air. The quiet hum of the rain against the roof is a soft lullaby, coaxing you toward sleep, though your mind refuses to rest. There's always something that needs to be done, 100 things that never seem to wait for sleep. But tonight, for just a moment, you allow yourself the luxury of stillness. The evening meal is over, the dishes are washed, and the chores are done for now. The next day will come soon enough, but for now, there is only this: the flickering fire and the faint, steady rhythm of the rain. You sip your small cup of tea, the warmth of it spreading through you as you close your eyes for a moment, the flickering shadows of the fire playing on the walls. You think of the endless rounds of cooking, cleaning, and tending to the children. It feels like an unbreakable loop, doesn't it? A constant, never-ending cycle. You wonder sometimes if it will always be this way. Will there ever be time for something more than this? Something other than survival? Or is this simply the way of life? The way it always has been for women in households like yours? Historians have long debated the emotional toll this life might have taken on women in the 18th century. Was there ever a time when housework and the duties of raising children were viewed as a form of personal fulfillment, or was it always a burden? Some suggest that housewives of the era found comfort in the act of nurturing, in creating a home for their families, while others argue that the pressure to constantly provide led to a quiet kind of exhaustion. In truth, it was probably a bit of both. You wonder if the women before you ever felt the same way, the ones who lived in this very house long ago. Did they find comfort in the tasks, or did the routine weigh them down just as it does for you? Perhaps it's a question without a true answer, just a matter of perspective. The fire dims slightly and you stoke it again, watching the flames leap higher as the wood cracks and pops. A few embers float upward, swirling like little stars before being swallowed by the darkness. The warmth fills the room once more and you sit back, your thoughts drifting lazily between the past and the present. Tomorrow there will be more work to do, more food to prepare, more tasks that seem to stretch on without end. You think about the cycle again, the endless spinning wheel of daily life, from dawn to dusk, from meal to meal, from chore to chore. There's never any real break from it, is there? No real time to stop and reflect, to savor moments outside of the constant motion. You stand up slowly, stretching your back, which has begun to ache from the constant work. You approach the window and look out into the night. The rain is still coming down, soft and steady, washing the world clean. There's something peaceful about it, about the way the rain seems to make everything slow down for just a while. The world outside is still, as if it too is taking a deep breath. Inside, the house is warm and quiet, and for just a moment you allow yourself to let go of the weight you carry. The children are safe. The house is still standing, there's food for tomorrow, and you, despite it all, are still here. Tomorrow's chores will wait, just as they always do. Tonight, you let the quiet wash over you like the rain outside. You close your eyes and let the peace of the moment linger. Historians still argue whether housewives ever truly found rest in their lives, or if their lives were simply a constant pursuit of small, daily victories. But for now, in this moment, you know one thing for certain. There is rest, however fleeting, and sometimes that's all you can hope for. The fire crackles gently as you settle back, letting the warmth seep into your bones. You think about the day that's coming, the work, the routine, the endless cycle. But for tonight, you allow yourself the comfort of simply being. The world can wait. And as you sit there, alone with your thoughts in the fire, you realize that tomorrow will be just another day. But tonight, for now, there's only peace. The dawn is slow to arrive, creeping in through the cracks in the shutters, the pale light casting long shadows across the room. The air feels colder now, the first true bite of the season's chill, settling in as you rise from your bed, your bones stiff from the weight of another long night. It's a familiar sensation, the ache of waking, the reluctance to leave the warmth of the blankets, the heavy pull of sleep still clinging to you. But there's no time to linger in bed. There's always something waiting. The house is already beginning to stir with the sounds of waking. The soft shuffle of feet, the rustle of clothing, the murmur of voices from the other room. The children are starting to wake, their bodies twisting beneath the covers, reluctant to leave their dreams behind. You smile at the thought of them, the way they cling to the warmth, as if the world outside is something they're not quite ready to face. The fire has long since died down, but the embers are still glowing faintly, enough to light your way as you move about the kitchen. You gather the few ingredients you have left, the remnants of yesterday's meal, and begin preparing breakfast. It's not much, just a simple porridge made from the last of the oats and some water, but it's something. There's no room for extravagance here. It's all about making do, making the most of what's available. As you stir the pot, you can't help but think of the food you used to dream about. Those days when you could afford a little more, when meals were varied and rich, when the pantry shelves were filled to the brim with every kind of nourishment you could want. But those days are gone. Now it's the simple things. The things that fill your stomach, but not your soul. Historians often debate whether women in the 18th century were ever able to enjoy their meals as anything more than a means of survival. Was food just fuel, a necessary component of the day-to-day? Or did it hold a deeper meaning for them? Did the act of preparing and sharing meals bring joy, or was it merely another task in the unending cycle of chores? You wonder if your grandmother, or the women before her, felt the same way. If they too had once dreamed of sitting down to a meal that wasn't just enough to get by, but something special. Something that wasn't born out of necessity, but out of choice. And yet, you can't bring yourself to regret the small comforts. The warmth of the fire, the smell of breakfast filling the house, the quiet hum of the children as they start to stir. The youngest enters the kitchen first, blinking sleepily at you. She's still holding her blanket in one hand, her other hand rubbing her eyes. You greet her with a soft smile and begin to serve the porridge into the small bowls. She climbs into her chair, still groggy, her little face lighting up when she sees the food in front of her. She doesn't know yet that it's just oats and water, that it's not much. For her, it's the promise of something to eat, and that's enough. The others begin to trickle in, one by one. They're still half-dazed, rubbing their eyes, their faces sleepy and soft. You pass out the bowls, each child's portion a little smaller than the last, but no one complains. Not anymore. They've learned that this is how things are. You sit down with your own bowl, and for a moment, there's silence. A rare, peaceful silence, broken only by the soft sounds of slurping and chewing. It's not much, but in a strange way, it feels like a luxury. A warm meal shared around the table, however meager, is still a meal. You look at the children, their faces round with contentment, and for a moment you feel a flicker of something deep inside you. Something that feels like hope. There's always a small, quiet satisfaction in feeding the people you love. Even when the food isn't much, even when it doesn't feel like enough. You know you've done something for them, something to keep them going. It's a small victory, but in a life full of small battles, victories like these mean more than you realize. As the children finish their meal, the conversation turns to the tasks of the day. There's always something to do. The laundry needs to be hung, the floor swept, the fire stoked again. Outside, the rain has stopped, but the air is still damp and cold. It's the perfect kind of weather to keep working indoors, to keep moving, to keep doing. You finish your porridge and set the bowl aside, then stand to begin the day's chores. The fire needs more wood, the table needs clearing, and the house will never stay clean for long, no matter how much you scrub. But these are the tasks of the day, the tasks that make up this life. Historians still debate whether there was ever a time in history when women could truly rest, or if their work was always a constant, unrelenting thing. Some argue that the work of running a household was a form of mastery, an art to be perfected. Others suggest it was a trap, a system that left little room for anything other than duty. But you know that today, like every day before it, you will keep going. You'll rise early, work hard, and make sure the family has what it needs. The work never ends, but neither does the love you give, the care you take with each task. And that, you think, is what keeps everything going. As you move about the house, a steady rhythm takes over. The fire is stoked, the children are tended to, and the small, simple tasks of the day unfold. You'll never stop working, never stop doing what needs to be done. But in the midst of it all, there's a quiet satisfaction in knowing you're still here, still making it through no matter how hard it gets. For now, there's only the steady flow of the day and the hope that somehow it will always be enough. The morning stretches on slowly, the sun creeping higher in the sky, though the chill in the air still holds on. The house, though humble, hums with a quiet energy. The soft thuds of small feet on the wooden floors, the rhythmic clinking of pots and pans in the kitchen, the murmur of voices as the children play. These are the sounds of the day's beginning. Another round of chores awaits, and despite the exhaustion that clings to you like a second skin, you find yourself slipping back into the familiar rhythm of the routine. You set about preparing the midday meal with what little you have. Some dried beans, a handful of barley, and a few roots that you've managed to preserve from the garden. There's no room for waste, not in a house like this. Every scrap, every leftover must be used, even if it's only to make a simple stew. The children will be hungry again, and that means more food needs to be made, no matter how scarce the supplies are. The thought of the growing shortage in your pantry nags at you as you slice the vegetables. It's a subtle worry, one you've learned to bury for the sake of your family. There's no point in letting them see your anxiety, not when you're doing everything you can to stretch what little you have. But it's there, in the back of your mind, a constant presence that keeps you on edge. You wonder sometimes how long you'll be able to keep up the charade of plenty when there's so little left. As you stir the pot, you find yourself thinking about the past, the days before things became so tight. You remember the time when there were more fresh vegetables, more meat, more of everything. The luxury of a table full of food, the luxury of choice. But those days seem so far away now, almost like another life entirely. The bounty of a well-stocked kitchen is a distant memory, and you have come to realize that you can no longer take such things for granted. Historians often debate the role of food in 18th century households. Was it a simple necessity, something to be consumed without much thought? Or was it something more, a symbol of status, wealth, and abundance? In the homes of the wealthy, food was often lavish, a way to display power and privilege. But for households like yours, food was more than just fuel. It was a constant reminder of the fragility of life. The pressure to provide, to make do with what little you had, was always there, lurking beneath the surface. As you prepare the stew, you find yourself thinking about the future, about the next season's harvest, about the crops you hope will grow, about the possibility of more lean times ahead. You think about your children, about how you want them to have a life that's better than this, a life where food isn't always a struggle. It's a quiet dream, one you've held close for years, though it seems ever more distant as each year passes. The children wander in one by one, drawn by the smell of the stew. Their faces are still sleepy, their hair unkempt, but they are eager, their small hands reaching for their bowls. You serve them the meal, and though it's simple, there's a moment of satisfaction in seeing them eat. It's a fleeting feeling, the satisfaction of providing, but it's enough to keep you going. You sit down with them, the fire crackling behind you, and share the meal together. It's not much, but in this moment, it's everything. The laughter of the children, the warmth of the food, the simple joy of being together. It's these small things that make the long hours of work, the constant worry, bearable. As the meal winds down, you begin to think about the next task at hand. There's always something to do, always something that needs attention. The fire must be tended to, the laundry needs to be hung, the animals need feeding. You have no time to sit still, no time to rest. The work, it seems, is endless. Historians still argue whether 18th century housewives ever found real peace in their work, or if it was always a matter of survival, a constant rush from one task to the next. Some suggest that there was a certain pride in the work, a sense of mastery over the domestic sphere, while others believe that it was an exhausting, unyielding cycle that left little room for anything else. But for you, it's a bit of both. There's a sense of pride in what you do, in the way you manage to stretch your resources to keep your family going, but there's also the weariness that comes with knowing that tomorrow will be more of the same. The children finish their meal and scatter off to play, leaving you to clean up. You clear the table and wash the dishes, the familiar motions of the day's chores bringing a certain calm. It's a routine you've come to rely on, a rhythm that helps you keep your mind focused and steady. Even when the world feels uncertain, even when the future seems unclear, the simple tasks of the day provide a grounding force. You step outside briefly, letting the cool air refresh you as you check on the animals and tend to the small garden. The sky's overcast, the threat of rain still hanging in the air, but you take comfort in the work. There's something about being outdoors, about tending to the earth, that helps to quiet the noise in your head. Historians still wonder whether the daily tasks of women in the 18th century, whether they were as mundane as cooking or as intricate as weaving, were viewed as a form of artistry, a craft honed over time. Was there an appreciation for the skill that went into running a household, or was it simply seen as the expected duty? For you, it's a bit of both. There's artistry in the way you've learned to manage the house, to make do with what you have, to take pride in small victories. But there's also the deep, unyielding pressure to keep it all going. As you finish your work outside, the children call for you from the house. There's always something more to do, but for now, you've made it through another day. Another round of tasks, another meal served. The world moves forward and you move with it, steady and sure, even when the future feels uncertain. For now, there's just the quiet satisfaction of the work done, the warmth of the fire inside, and the knowledge that, despite everything, you're still here. The evening is settling in, casting long shadows across the room, the fire casting flickering shapes on the stone walls. The children have long since finished their play and are now tucked into bed, their small bodies curled beneath the quilts you've made, their breathing soft and steady. The house is quiet again, save for the occasional creak of the timbers or the soft murmur of the wind outside. You sit by the hearth, the warmth still strong but beginning to wane as the night deepens. The embers crackle softly, casting occasional sparks into the air, as though they're reluctant to give up their light. You stir the fire, watching the flames dance higher, feeling their heat wash over you. It's moments like this, quiet, peaceful, that you long for, though they come too infrequently. As the fire burns steadily, your mind drifts, as it often does, to the future. You think about tomorrow's work, the endless list of things that need to be done. There's never enough time to do everything, is there? The list of tasks is always longer than the hours in the day, but somehow you keep up. You always have, and somehow you always will. Still, there's a part of you that wonders what it would be like to have more. More time, more resources, more freedom. It's a thought that sneaks up on you in the quiet moments, like this one. What if you didn't have to stretch every meal, didn't have to constantly worry about where the next sack of flour would come from? What if you could sit for a moment, truly rest, without the looming weight of unfinished chores pressing down on your shoulders? But there's no time for daydreams, is there? You've long ago learned that the dreams of women in households like yours are often put aside, discarded in favor of the demands of daily life. The work is always there, always waiting. It never stops, never slows. The day may end, but the work continues in your mind, even as your body grows tired. Historians have long pondered the emotional and psychological toll of such a life. Was there ever a time when the women who lived this way felt true rest? Or were they always caught in the cycle of work, always moving from one task to the next? Some argue that the relentless nature of household work was a source of pride for women, that their labor was seen as essential, even noble. Others suggest that the constant pressure was a silent kind of oppression, one that kept women tethered to the domestic sphere without the freedom to explore lives beyond it. You wonder sometimes how the women who came before you felt. Did they too dream of something different? Or was it always just about survival, about keeping the family fed, clothed, and sheltered? You think about your own mother, the way she worked without complaint, the way she made sure everything was in order before she rested. She never seemed tired, at least she never showed it. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do. Work hard, give everything, and never let on how much it costs you. But as the fire dims and the room grows colder, you allow yourself a moment of quiet reflection. Tomorrow's work will still be there waiting, but tonight you have a rare stillness. The children are safe, the house is intact, and there's food enough for tomorrow. The simplest comforts are the ones that matter most, you think. You'll never stop working, never stop giving, but for tonight, there's a small flicker of peace in the quiet of the room, in the soft crackling of the fire. The night deepens, and the house grows quieter still. The sounds of the world outside fade into the distance, and all that remains is the rhythmic pulse of the fire. You lean back in your chair, your body heavy from the day's labor, and allow your thoughts to drift just a little. Tomorrow will come, as it always does. But for now, there is only this moment. The soft warmth of the fire, the quiet comfort of the room, and the peace of knowing you've done all you can. It's easy sometimes to get lost in the weight of it all, the endless chores, the constant demands, the feeling that there's always more to do. But in moments like this, you remind yourself that you're doing enough. You've always done enough. And that perhaps is the most important thing. Historians still debate whether the women who lived this way felt fulfillment in their work, or whether they merely endured. Some believe that the work itself, despite its unrelenting nature, could have brought some sense of purpose, a feeling of mastery over the domain of the household. Others suggest that such lives were not as satisfying as we like to think, that women's work was a form of labor that stripped away their sense of self, leaving them defined only by their roles within the family. But in the end, you know one thing for sure. You are here. You have endured and you will continue to do so. There is strength in that, even if no one else sees it. The fire is burned down now, its warmth fading into a gentle glow. The room is quiet. You stand and stretch, preparing for sleep, knowing that tomorrow will be just another round of the same. Another meal to prepare, another task to complete, another day to face. But for tonight, there is rest. You pull the blankets up around you, the warmth of your bed a welcome contrast to the cool night air. The house is still, the children are sleeping, and you close your eyes, your thoughts drifting like the embers in the hearth. Tomorrow will be here before you know it, but for now there's nothing to do but rest. And so you settle in, letting the stillness of the night wrap around you and close your eyes to the world. Tomorrow will come, but tonight, for now, there is peace. The soft glow of dawn is just beginning to spill through the shutters, a pale line of light creeping across the floor. The house is still, the air cool with the lingering remnants of night. But you're already awake, eyes fluttering open long before the rest of the household stirs. The silence is comforting, yet you know it's only temporary. Soon the children will be awake, the demands of the day will begin anew, and the cycle will continue. You lay still for a moment, savoring the quiet, but the pull of responsibility is too strong to ignore. You slowly rise, your feet meeting the cold floor, the weight of another day settling into your bones. The fire from last night has long since burned out, leaving only the faintest remnants of warmth. You'll have to stoke it again, but that's not what's on your mind just now. As you step into the kitchen, the familiar smell of the hearth greets you. It's not a grand scent. There's no rich roast, no simmering stew, just the faint odor of wood smoke lingering in the corners. A reminder of the fire that's needed to keep the house warm. You take a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill your lungs, and for a moment you wonder if there's ever a chance to feel truly warm. Physically warm, yes, the fire can do that. But what about the warmth that comes from rest, from peace? Can anyone ever feel that warmth in a life so full of endless demands? But you've long stopped wondering about that. There's no time to contemplate such things now. There's work to be done, and the day must begin. You begin gathering the few ingredients you have left, the last of the dried grains and a few roots that you managed to store from the last harvest. These will be today's breakfast. Simple, nourishing, but enough to keep everyone going for the morning. As you prepare the meal, you can't help but think about the past. There was a time when the mornings weren't so rushed, when there was room for a leisurely breakfast, when there was more to eat and time enough to enjoy it. But that time seems so far away now, as if it belonged to someone else's life. In the 18th century, food was a constant balancing act, one of scarcity and plenty, of feast and famine. For the wealthier households, mornings could be filled with a variety of foods: bread, eggs, cheese, maybe even a small piece of meat. But for families like yours, breakfast was rarely a meal to look forward to. It was just the first hurdle of the day, a necessary task before moving on to the more pressing demands of the household. A quick bowl of porridge, perhaps some stale bread, and then off to work. No time to savor, no time to indulge. Historians still debate the importance of breakfast in 18th century homes. Was it as rushed and utilitarian as many suggest, or were there moments of enjoyment to be found in those early hours? Some scholars believe that meals like breakfast were an opportunity for families to connect, even if just briefly, before the day's work took over. Others argue that for the working-class households, it was simply a matter of survival, getting something into your stomach quickly before heading off to the fields, or the factory, or wherever the day's work awaited. For you, it's a mix of both. The children drift into the kitchen one by one, sleepy-eyed, their hair tousled from the night. They sit down at the table accepting their portions of porridge with quiet grumbling. It's a meal, and that's enough. There's no room for complaints, no room for expectation beyond that simple fact. The food might not be exciting, but it will sustain them for now, and that's all you can ask for. As the children eat, the house begins to wake in earnest. The sounds of life filter in, the creak of the stairs as someone climbs down, the quiet murmur of voices as the rest of the family begins to stir. There's no rush, no hurry, but there's a subtle energy that builds as the morning unfolds. The work begins to take shape, as it always does. The fire needs to be stoked, the laundry needs to be hung, the animals must be fed. You can't help but feel a sense of familiarity in the routine, a comforting knowledge that the world hasn't changed overnight. The tasks may be repetitive, but they're also a kind of anchor. There's a steadiness to them that keeps you grounded. The knowledge that no matter how difficult the day gets, there will always be something to do. And in a way, that's a small comfort. Having something to focus on, something that needs doing, something you can control in a world that often feels like it's slipping away. Historians still debate the emotional impact of routine work, particularly in the context of women's lives in the 18th century. Was it a source of comfort, a way to create order in a chaotic world? Or was it simply a relentless grind that left little room for individuality or rest? Some argue that routine work could be a source of satisfaction, even pride, as it represented control over the domestic sphere. Others suggest that the constant cycle of work was exhausting, leaving little room for personal fulfillment. You've come to understand it both ways. Some days the work feels like an anchor, something to hold on to when everything else is in flux. But other days it feels like a burden, an endless series of tasks that don't seem to end, no matter how much you give. As the day progresses, you slip into the rhythm of your chores, sweeping the floors, tending to the fire, preparing for the next meal. The time slips away, and before you know it, the sun is dipping low in the sky again. The house is quiet once more, the children tucked in, the fire crackling softly. And yet, despite the exhaustion that clings to your limbs, there's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that for another day, you've kept everything moving. Historians still argue whether the daily labor of 18th century housewives was ever truly fulfilling. For you, it's a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. The work is hard, the day's long, but at the end of it, there's a sense of accomplishment in knowing that despite everything, you've made it through. For tonight, as you sit by the fire, you allow yourself a moment to breathe. Tomorrow will come, with all its tasks and challenges. But for now, there's a stillness in the room, a moment of peace before it all begins again. You close your eyes, letting the quiet settle around you, knowing that tomorrow you will rise again to face it all. But for now, there is rest. The room is cool as the night deepens, and the sounds of the world outside are nothing but distant murmurs now. Inside, there's only the soft crackling of the fire, the occasional pop of a log shifting in the hearth, and the rhythm of your breathing. It's a tranquil moment, one that seems to stretch endlessly, as though time itself has slowed to match the calm of the house. You settle deeper into your chair, the worn fabric of your dress softly creasing beneath you, and for a moment, the weight of the day is forgotten. But soon enough, the quiet becomes less comforting and more unsettling. The absence of movement around you feels too still, as though everything is waiting for something to break the silence. Your hands, once so busy throughout the day, now rest at your sides, and the stillness invites a sense of unease. It's a familiar feeling, one that has crept into your bones over the years, the knowledge that no matter how quiet the evening may seem, it is fleeting. The demands of tomorrow will soon come, as relentless as they have always been. For now, though, there is nothing to do but reflect. The work, the endless chores, the never-ending cycle of daily life. These are constants in your existence. But in moments like this, when the house is calm and the children are asleep, there's space for a quiet contemplation of what it all means. What's the point of it all? Is there something more than just this constant push to survive? You find yourself drifting back to your thoughts about the past, about the choices that brought you here. It feels like a lifetime ago when you first took on this life, the weight of it, the demands of it all. But you've adapted, haven't you? You've learned to navigate the expectations, to find your place in this world where women like you have few options, few opportunities for anything beyond what's expected of them. Historians often muse about the psychological impact of this kind of life, about the way women in the 18th century lived within the boundaries set for them. Was there a sense of fulfillment, or was it all just about surviving another day? Some scholars suggest that women found meaning in their work, even if it wasn't celebrated or acknowledged. Others believe the constant demands of domestic life were a stifling burden, one that left little room for personal growth or freedom. You think about the women in your life, your mother, your grandmothers, even the neighbors. Did they ever question the life they lived? Or did they simply accept it as the only way to exist? You're not sure, but you suspect that even if they did question it, there was no room for that questioning to be anything other than a passing thought. The demands of life, of family, of duty, they left no space for anything else. As the fire begins to die down, you feel the weight of the silence press in once more. The children are asleep, tucked safely in their beds, and for the moment, the house is quiet. The world outside is dark, the sky heavy with clouds, and you can almost feel the weight of the earth pressing down on you. A reminder of how small your concerns are in the grand scheme of things. Yet at the same time, they are everything to you. The house, the work, the food, the children, all of it is woven together in a delicate balance. It's a life built on small moments, small victories and small defeats. But those moments add up, don't they? They accumulate into something that sustains you, even when the work seems endless. Even when the days blur together into a single unbroken line of labor. Historians still debate the emotional cost of 18th century domesticity. Was it a source of pride, a deep connection to home and family, or was it, as some suggest, a form of imprisonment? A life spent fulfilling obligations with little regard for personal desires? For you, it's something in between. There are days when the work feels meaningful, when you can see the fruits of your labor in the clean floorboards, in the freshly cooked meal, in the children's laughter. But there are other days when it feels like nothing more than an endless march, a treadmill of tasks with no respite in sight. As you sit in the quiet of the room, you let your thoughts wander, and for a brief moment, you wonder if there's more to life than this. You wonder if the world beyond the walls of your house holds something different, something that doesn't involve the endless demands of survival, something that offers freedom. But then, as quickly as the thought appears, it fades. There's no room for such dreams in this life. Not when there's always something that needs to be done, something that requires your attention. But even in the midst of this understanding, you can't help but feel a quiet sense of gratitude. You've made it this far, haven't you? The work may be endless, the responsibilities heavy, but you've endured. You've kept your family fed, kept them safe, and somehow managed to keep the house running. That's no small feat, and deep down, you know it. The fire has burned down to a soft glow now, its warmth fading as the room cools. You rise from your chair, stretching your tired limbs, and make your way to the children's room. You check on them, their small forms tucked in and still, their breath steady and soft. There's a quiet joy in seeing them safe, in knowing that, for now, they are untouched by the worries of the world outside. It's a fleeting moment, but it's enough to remind you of why you do it all, why you get up every morning, why you face the endless cycle of work, why you keep going. You return to your chair by the fire, settling in for the night. There's still so much left to do, and tomorrow will come with its own set of challenges. But for now, the quiet is a balm for your tired soul. Tomorrow you'll rise again, ready to face whatever the day brings. But tonight, for just a little longer, you allow yourself the luxury of rest. Historians still debate whether the relentless nature of domestic work in the 18th century led to a sense of fulfillment, or whether it was simply an unending burden. Some suggest that the labor could be a source of pride, while others believe it left little room for dreams. For you, it's both. A cycle of exhaustion and small victories, a life built on the quiet persistence of everyday tasks. But tonight the work is done, and for now, that's enough. The night wears on, and the room is now cloaked in darkness, save for the dim glow of the smoldering hearth. The fire has long since settled into soft embers, casting faint flickers of light that dance across the walls. The wind outside hums through the cracks in the shutters, the only reminder of the world beyond the house. The children are asleep, their soft breathing the only other sound filling the quiet. The day's work is over, and for now, you are free from the demands of labor. But you know this peace will be fleeting. Tomorrow will come, just as it always does. The work will begin again. You feel the weight of that certainty, but for tonight, there is a quiet satisfaction in knowing that you've done all you could. The house is in order, the children are safe, and the food is ready for the next day. That, in itself, is enough. As you sit by the hearth, the thoughts of the past day begin to settle in. You think about the work you've done, the laundry, the cooking, the cleaning. There's a rhythm to it all, a sense of purpose that comes from the repetition of the tasks. You've always known what needs to be done and how to do it. There's a certain pride in that, in being able to manage a household, to keep it running smoothly despite the constant demands. But you also wonder, sometimes, if that's all there is. The endless cycle of work, the constant push to keep things in order. What would it be like to have the luxury of rest, to be able to pause and simply exist without the pressure of duties weighing on you? You suppose it's a fantasy, one that's not meant for women like you, who have always been taught that their worth lies in their ability to work, to serve, to provide? The idea of a life without those expectations seems distant, almost foreign. Historians still argue about the emotional toll of women's labor in the 18th century. Were they simply products of their time, bound by societal norms that dictated their roles? Or were there moments of joy, of true fulfillment, in the daily work they did? Some scholars suggest that, for many women, the act of managing a household and raising children provided a deep sense of purpose. Others argue that the constant pressure to maintain a home left little room for self-expression or personal satisfaction, and that the emotional burden of this responsibility was immense. For you, it's a mixture of both. There are moments when the work feels like an expression of care, when the act of feeding your family or keeping the house tidy feels deeply fulfilling. But there are also moments like now when you wonder if it's enough. If your life will always be defined by the endless tasks, the responsibilities that never seem to end. But then again, you've never been one to question what you can't change. The work is a part of you, woven into the fabric of your existence. You've always done it, and you will continue to do so, just as the women before you did. There is pride in that, even if no one else acknowledges it. As the fire dims and the room grows colder, you find yourself reflecting on what's next. The day will break soon, and with it, the promise of another round of chores and responsibilities. But there's something comforting about the routine, something that helps ground you in the face of all the uncertainty. The knowledge that you have a purpose, that there is always something to do, something to care for. In a way, it's a small assurance in a world that can often feel unpredictable. You pull your blanket closer around your shoulders, the warmth of the fabric a welcome contrast to the chill in the air. You sit there for a while, watching the last of the embers fade, feeling the stillness of the room settle around you like a heavy cloak. It's a peaceful moment, a moment of quiet before the demands of the world outside rush back in. As you prepare to sleep, you allow yourself to be still for a while longer. The house is safe, the children are protected, and the work for the day is done. There's nothing more to do right now except rest, to let the quiet wash over you and allow your body to relax. Tomorrow, you'll rise again, just as you always do. The work will be waiting, but for now, there's peace in knowing that you've made it through another day. Historians still debate whether the relentless nature of household labor in the 18th century left room for personal fulfillment, or whether it was simply a cycle of survival. For you, the work is both a duty and a challenge. It's tiring, often thankless, but it's also a way of caring for the people you love, of making sure that the house is warm, the children are fed, and the day is navigated as best as it can be. For now, though, it's time to rest. Tomorrow will bring its own set of tasks, its own set of challenges. But tonight, for this fleeting moment, you allow yourself the comfort of knowing that you've done your part. You close your eyes, letting the last remnants of the fire's warmth sink into your bones, and you let the silence of the night cradle you. Tomorrow will come, and you will rise again to meet it, but tonight you allow yourself to rest. The night air is thick with silence, and yet, as you drift deeper into sleep, you're aware of the world just beyond the walls of your home. The wind picks up outside, whispering through the cracks in the shutters, the occasional creak of the house's framework settling beneath its weight. But inside there's nothing but the warmth of your bed, the quiet of your children's breathing, and the flickering remnants of the fire. It's another morning on the horizon, though you can't feel it just yet. For now, you're in a world that exists only in the darkened corners of the room, a space where time feels suspended, unhurried. You let yourself settle into the softness of your blanket, surrendering to the pull of sleep, feeling your body relax with each passing breath. The demands of the day seem distant, intangible, as though they belong to a future self, someone who will awaken and face the world as you have so many times before. But sleep is fleeting. The dawn will arrive soon enough, bringing with it the rhythm of life that's as constant as the turning of the seasons. When it does, you'll rise, as you always do, and begin the work that never seems to end. When you wake, it's still dark outside, but there's a subtle shift in the air, an undeniable sign that the world is starting to stir. The first sounds of morning are faint, a soft groan of the house as it stretches awake, the flutter of birds in the trees outside, the distant bark of a dog. But the world inside your home is still quiet. You lie there for a moment, eyes open but unwilling to move as the silence envelops you like a heavy blanket. It's a moment of peace, the only true stillness you'll get before the day begins. You know what comes next. The fire needs to be stoked. The children will wake soon, hungry and impatient. There's a list of tasks awaiting you, and as the light grows dimmer, the weight of the day becomes more pressing. But in this space, where the world is still mostly dark, you allow yourself a moment of quiet, a rare breath before the storm. Historians still debate how much time 18th century housewives had to themselves, whether the demands of daily life left any room for solitude. Was it a life defined by the endless tasks of survival? Or were there moments where women could, if only for a moment, exist outside the role of caretaker and worker? Some believe that women found moments of solitude in the hours before the household awoke, a time when the world was still and there was no one to care for but themselves. Others argue that these early mornings were filled with the pressure of the day's tasks, leaving little room for self-reflection. For you, the early mornings are both. There's the momentary stillness, the brief respite before the day's work begins, but there's also the unspoken pressure of the tasks ahead. The knowledge that the day's responsibilities will come soon, whether you're ready or not. The fire needs tending, and you rise from your bed, your bare feet meeting the cool floorboards with a soft thud. You pull your blanket tighter around your shoulders as you make your way to the hearth. The room feels colder now, the embers almost gone, but with a few quick motions, you rekindle the fire. It crackles to life, the warmth slowly returning to the room. As the fire grows stronger, you take a moment to stand by the hearth, feeling its heat seep into your bones. You allow yourself a quiet breath, a small indulgence in the comfort of the flames. The house is still, the children's soft snores the only sound filling the air. The world outside is beginning to brighten, and you know the day will soon begin in earnest. The fire will need tending again. The children will stir and demand food, and you'll fall into the rhythm of another long day. Historians still argue whether the labor of the 18th century housewife was ever truly fulfilling. Was it a means of survival, a way to keep a household running, or was it an act of care, of love, for those who depended on her? Some believe that the daily tasks were a form of emotional labor, something that provided meaning beyond just the physical work. Others argue that the constant demands of cooking, cleaning, and child-rearing left little room for personal fulfillment. For you, it's both. The work is tiring, repetitive, and sometimes thankless. But there are moments of meaning too. When you prepare a meal for your family, when you tuck your children into bed, when you tend to the fire to keep everyone warm, these acts are expressions of care. They're part of the rhythm of life that sustains the household. As the room warms, you turn your attention to the children. They are stirring now, their sleepy faces peeking out from beneath the blankets. It won't be long before they're up, demanding their share of the morning's meal. You move quickly, preparing whatever scraps or ingredients you have left, piecing together the first meal of the day. It won't be much, but it'll be enough. It always is. Breakfast is a quiet affair. The children, still half asleep, eat their portions with a little fuss. There's no time for conversation, no time for anything but the simple act of eating. The day is already demanding, and there's little room for anything beyond the work ahead. But as you sit down for a moment, you watch them eat, and a small sense of fulfillment rises within you. It's not much, but it's enough for now. You've done what needed to be done. Historians still argue about the role of food in the 18th century home. Was it a source of comfort, a way to nourish the body and soul, or was it simply a necessity to fuel the endless work of the day? For you, food is both. It's a way to keep the body strong, to sustain your family, but it's also an act of love. Every meal, no matter how simple, is a reminder of the care you give to those you love. The children finish their meal, and the day begins to take shape around you. The fire needs tending, the laundry must be hung, and the house needs cleaning. The work is never ending, but it's a rhythm you know well. The world outside is beginning to wake, and you too will rise to meet it. But for now, there's a moment of quiet, a moment to breathe before the day fully takes hold. The warmth of the hearth seeps into your skin as you step closer, the flickering orange light dancing in your peripheral vision. The fire's crackle is a comfort, its steady rhythm a subtle signal that the house is still alive, still breathing. But beyond the fire's glow, there's the day ahead, looming, unyielding. You glance toward the children, still sleepy-eyed and groggy, their small forms huddled together in the corner. They'll need more than just food. They'll need your presence, your guidance. A house is built on more than walls. It thrives through the bonds within it, and right now, those bonds are shifting with every passing hour. You quickly organize the morning tasks in your head. There's no time to waste. Soon, the household will demand your full attention. It always does, without fail. Today, like every day, there will be laundry to wash, meals to prepare, floors to scrub, and the endless cycles of cleaning that make the house feel like a place of order amid the chaos. It's a rhythm you know well, an unspoken understanding that the house cannot function without your steady hand. But as you move through the motions, there's a faint, lingering thought. You wonder briefly if the day could be different, if, for once, you could step outside the cycle of work, of obligation. Historians, in their quest to understand 18th century domestic life, often describe it as a relentless routine. Women were expected to balance household duties with emotional care for their families. Some even argue that this work was performed out of love, that the daily tasks were an expression of care and connection. But was it always like that? Or was there something more? A desire for space, for time away from the ever-present weight of responsibility? Some scholars believe that 18th century women often found small moments of rebellion in these mundane tasks, not by refusing the work, but by transforming it into something more personal. The act of cooking, for example, could be a space for creativity, for individual expression, a way to assert control over something in an otherwise controlled life. Others argue that these tasks were just another form of servitude, a constant reminder of how little autonomy women had over their own lives. For you, the question remains unanswered. There are days when the work feels like an expression of care, a way of connecting with the people you love. But there are other days when it's just about survival, about keeping things running, about maintaining a fragile balance that could tip over with the smallest disruption. In those moments, the tasks become a weight, a constant pressure to do more, to be more, without the opportunity to pause or breathe. The children, now awake and stretching, begin to move through the house with the rest of their day's demands. The momentary peace of the early morning is over, replaced by the chatter and movement of little feet, the whine of hungry voices. You return to the hearth to stoke the fire, ensuring that the warmth continues to spread throughout the house. The cold seems to creep in from every corner, and the fire offers you some small comfort as you prepare for the busy hours ahead. Breakfast is a simple affair. There's not much to go around, and yet you make sure that each plate is filled, that no one goes hungry. The scraps of food from last night's meal are repurposed into something new, something that will sustain the family until the next round of work. In the absence of abundance, resourcefulness becomes your ally. You make do with what you have, always finding a way to stretch the meager supplies into something more. Historians often note how 18th century households, especially those in rural areas, had to rely on this kind of resourcefulness. Every scrap of food was repurposed, nothing went to waste. Women, particularly, were tasked with managing these limited resources, and their ability to stretch a meal or reuse leftovers was a skill that went largely unacknowledged. In fact, it's still something that we take for granted today. For you, this resourcefulness is second nature. You take pride in it, even if no one else notices. There's something deeply satisfying in being able to create something out of almost nothing. The meal may not be grand, but it's nourishing, and that's what matters. It's a small victory in a world that often feels like a series of endless challenges. As you and the children finish breakfast, the house starts to take shape. The day begins in earnest. You move from room to room, gathering the remnants of the morning, tidying as you go. The laundry needs to be tended to, and there are always tasks left unfinished from yesterday. You know that no matter how much you do, there will always be more to be done. But that's part of the rhythm, isn't it? The knowledge that the work will never end, but that it still matters. Historians still debate the concept of busy work in the 18th century home. Was the constant cycle of cleaning, cooking, and child rearing merely a way to fill time, a means of keeping women occupied, or was it something more significant? Some argue that it was a fundamental part of domestic life, an act of care that defined a woman's role within the home. Others suggest that the sheer repetitiveness of it all stifled any opportunity for personal growth or fulfillment. For you, it's a bit of both. There's no escaping the reality of your daily tasks. The work is endless, but it's also essential. It's what keeps the house running, what keeps your family together. You don't have the luxury of stepping away from it, not when there's so much to do. But in the small moments, in the little victories, you find a quiet satisfaction. The house may never be truly clean, the meals may never be as grand as you'd like, but they're enough. The children are dressed now, their faces brightening with the promise of the day ahead. You turn your attention to the next round of work, knowing that the cycle will begin again. But before you dive back into the rhythm, you take a moment to look around the house. It's not perfect, but it's yours. And in this world where nothing feels certain, that small sense of ownership, of having a space that is yours to shape and care for, feels like a fleeting treasure. And just like that, the day continues. There's no time to pause, no time to reflect too deeply. There's only the work, the never-ending work. As the day stretches on, there's a subtle shift in the air. The sun climbs higher, sending rays of light through the cracks in the windows, lighting up the dust motes that dance lazily in the warmth. The children are playing now, their laughter filling the house, echoing off the walls in a way that seems both comforting and chaotic. There's a moment of calm before they require your attention once more, but for now, the house feels alive. It's a temporary reprieve, the quiet hum of the daily work reaching a lull. You're deep in the rhythm now, washing clothes, hanging them to dry, cleaning the hearth, stirring the pot of soup for dinner. The motion's so familiar that you could do them in your sleep. Your hands move with purpose, each action a step in a sequence you've perfected over years of practice. You can almost feel the weight of the work, not in your body, but in your mind, as the tasks stack up. It's a heavy thing, this constant responsibility, but it's also comforting. The predictability of it all, the knowledge that tomorrow will demand the same of you, is strangely grounding. Historians still argue whether the repetitiveness of 18th century household tasks ever allowed for moments of true mental or emotional rest. Was this cycle of labor a way to maintain a sense of order in an otherwise uncertain world? Or did it become a trap, a never-ending loop that left women with little room for introspection or growth? Some believe that women found peace in the order they created, that the constant maintenance of the home gave them a sense of stability and purpose. Others suggest that the work was overwhelming, a constant reminder of how little control women had over their own lives. For you, it's both. There's satisfaction in the order, in the ability to control at least one part of your world. But there are moments, flickers of time, when you wonder about the world outside your home. What would it be like to step away from it all, to experience a day without the weight of endless tasks? You can't afford such luxuries, of course. The work must continue. The household must run smoothly, and it's your responsibility to ensure that it does. But for now, there's a brief, fleeting moment of peace. The children are playing outside, their voices fading into the distance as they run down the dirt path near the garden. You watch them from the window, the sight of their carefree movements a reminder of how different their world is from yours. They are free, in ways that you will never be, and yet you have given them that freedom. Your work, the sweat and the strain, has created the space for them to grow, to laugh, to be children. That in itself is a quiet triumph. The day continues, and the tasks pile on, sweeping the floors, preparing for dinner, checking on the animals, ensuring the garden is tended to. Each task is an echo of the ones that came before, a reminder of the endless loop that defines your life. There's no room for rest, no space to step away from the work, but there's a quiet satisfaction in the knowing. You do what must be done, and that's enough. Historians still debate whether the work of women in the 18th century was ever truly recognized for its value. Was it seen as an essential part of the household, or was it dismissed as something that women simply did? Some scholars argue that women's labor, especially in rural areas, was foundational to the survival of the household. Without them, the house would fall into disarray, and the family would struggle to survive. Others suggest that this labor was overlooked, that women's contributions to the household were taken for granted, their work invisible in the eyes of society. For you, this invisibility is a constant presence. You do the work, day in and day out, without any expectation of acknowledgement. It's simply what must be done. But there's a quiet pride in knowing that the house would not function without you, that the family would not thrive without your steady hand. It may not be seen by the outside world, but within the walls of your home, your labor is the foundation of everything. The hours slip by as you move through the tasks with the same practiced precision, the rhythm of the day becoming a kind of meditation. You're not really thinking about the work anymore. It's just part of you, like the air you breathe. And yet, there's always something more to do. Even when the work feels endless, you can't stop. The house must be cared for, the children must be fed, the family must be supported. It's a never-ending cycle, but it's yours. It's the world you know, the one you've built with your hands and your heart. As the afternoon draws to a close, you feel the weight of the day beginning to press on you. The children are tired now, their energy spent, and they begin to gather around, looking to you for the next meal. You prepare the evening meal, your hands moving automatically, the familiar motions a comfort. The house is beginning to settle again, the last burst of activity winding down as the sun begins to dip beneath the horizon. Historians still debate whether 18th century women ever truly had control over their own time. Was every minute accounted for, every hour devoted to the household? Or did women find ways to carve out moments for themselves, however fleeting they may have been? Some believe that these women lived in constant service to their families, with little room for personal desire or rest. Others suggest that in the small corners of their lives, women were able to find freedom, if only for a moment. For you, the moments of freedom are rare, but they are precious. The evening meal is quiet, a time to sit and share, to be together as a family. You watch the children eat, their faces tired but content, and you realize that despite the endless tasks, this is what you've worked for. The house is filled with life, with love, with connection. It may not be perfect, but it's yours. And that, for now, is enough. The day ends as it began, quietly, without fanfare. The tasks are complete, and you finally allow yourself a moment to breathe. Tomorrow will bring the same work, the same rhythm, but for tonight, there's peace in the knowing that you've done what needed to be done. The evening settles over the house with a gentle hush, the last embers of the fire casting long shadows on the walls. It's a peaceful stillness, the kind that fills a house after the clatter of the day has faded. The children have long since drifted to sleep, their small bodies tucked into blankets, the quiet rise and fall of their chests the only sound. You stand by the hearth, your hands still warm from the day's work, and for a moment, everything feels in balance. The house is at rest and so are you, or at least that's what you tell yourself. But as you gaze into the dying fire, your thoughts begin to stir. You've spent the day tending to the needs of everyone else, but what of your own? Historians often remark on the lack of personal autonomy that 18th century housewives had over their own time. For you, time has always belonged to the house, to the family. But even in the midst of the constant demands, there's an awareness, the understanding that you're living in someone else's shadow. The work you do is crucial, but it's taken for granted, both by those around you and by history itself. There's a delicate dance that women like you perform every day, balancing the needs of the household with your own sense of self. Some scholars argue that this balancing act was a source of quiet power, that women, though constrained by the domestic sphere, managed to carve out spaces of influence within it. Others suggest that these spaces were merely illusions, carefully crafted performances that mask the deeper reality of subjugation. For you, it's both. There are moments when you feel like the master of the house, the orchestrator of its rhythm, and there are moments when the weight of expectation feels crushing. You wonder if you've been shaped by this constant service, if the role you play has become so ingrained in you that it's impossible to separate yourself from it. In a way, the house has become a reflection of who you are, a silent monument to your labor, your sacrifices. But is that enough? Historians debate whether 18th century women ever truly found a way to assert their individuality outside the boundaries of the home. Was their identity defined entirely by their domestic role, or did they manage to weave in threads of personal ambition and desire? Some argue that, despite the overwhelming demands of the home, women found subtle ways to express themselves. Others suggest that, in a world so defined by duty, the chance to truly be oneself was a luxury few could afford. As you stare into the fire, you can't help but wonder if the women of history, your foremothers, ever asked themselves the same questions. Did they long for more than the confines of the hearth, or did they embrace it fully, content in the purpose it gave them? You'll never truly know. The stories of these women have been lost to time, buried under centuries of expectation and silence. What remains is a collective memory, shaped by others' perceptions of what their lives must have been. But your life is not just a story from the past. It's unfolding now, in real time, in the quiet moments of the night when the house finally falls into stillness. Your labor, your sacrifices are not yet history. They are living, breathing parts of the world, carried out in each action, each task, each quiet moment. The fire begins to flicker lower, its light dimming as the last of the wood burns away. You stoke it one last time, ensuring the warmth continues to radiate through the room. There's a finality to the evening, an end to the day's rhythm. But with that finality comes the inevitable return of tomorrow. The work will begin again, as it always does. And yet, there's a small moment of peace in knowing that you've done what needed to be done. The house is warm, the children are safe, and for tonight you can rest. Historians still argue over the emotional toll that this daily labor took on women. Was it fulfilling, or was it a heavy burden? Could women find joy in their work, or did they carry a quiet sorrow for the life they were unable to live outside the house? Some suggest that the sheer satisfaction of maintaining a home, of providing for a family, was enough to fill the emptiness. Others claim that it left women with a deep sense of longing, a yearning for something more, something beyond the walls of the home. For you, the truth lies somewhere in between. The work is both draining and rewarding, mundane and meaningful. And as you sit by the fire, the last traces of daylight fading, you allow yourself a brief moment of reflection. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again, and you will rise to meet it as you always do. But for now, there's peace. The house is quiet, the work is done, and in the soft glow of the embers, you let yourself simply be. The night deepens around you, the quiet of the house now holding a comforting weight. Outside, the wind picks up, rustling the trees, carrying with it the promise of another cold day ahead. Inside, the fire burns low, its orange glow softened by the darkened room. You sit, the weight of the day still pressing gently against your shoulders, but there's a certain peace that comes with the solitude. The house is asleep, and for the moment, the world outside is distant, far away from the demands of the daily life that fills your waking hours. It's a rare moment, this space between the closing of one day and the opening of another. There's no urgency in the air, no tasks left to be done, no meals to prepare or children to tend to. You simply exist in this small pocket of time where the house is still and the world beyond is muted. You might even dare to close your eyes for a moment, to imagine a life beyond the walls of this house, a life where the demands are different, where your time is your own. But even as you allow yourself that brief escape, the reality of the world outside settles back into your mind. Historians often note how 18th century women, especially those in rural areas, were bound to the rhythms of the land. Their lives were shaped not just by the needs of their families, but by the seasons, by the harvests, by the constant march of time that dictated when crops were planted, when food was preserved, when animals were slaughtered. It was a cycle that demanded attention at every turn, a cycle that left little room for personal freedom. And yet, some scholars argue that this constant connection to the land created a different kind of freedom, a freedom born of necessity. The rhythms of the seasons, the need to work with the land, allowed for a deep connection to the earth, to the cycles of life and death. It was a way of living that was attuned to nature, to the natural world around you. The work was hard, but it was also elemental, a reminder that you were part of something greater than the house, something greater than the family. You think about this as you sit in the quiet, the fire slowly dimming in front of you. There's a sense of unity in the daily work, a sense of belonging in the rhythms of the earth. You know that tomorrow you will rise to continue the cycle. There are always tasks to be done, always something that needs your attention. But for now, in this brief moment, you are just one person, sitting by the fire, the weight of the world outside momentarily lifted. There is something beautiful in that thought, a fleeting sense of peace that comes with the knowledge that, for tonight, the world is still. Historians still debate whether the rural women of the 18th century ever felt this peace, whether they were able to appreciate the quiet moments amid the constant labor. Some suggest that the isolation of rural life allowed for moments of introspection, a chance to connect with nature in a way that urban women could not. Others argue that the demands of rural labor left no room for such moments. that women were too overwhelmed by the physical work to reflect on their place in the world. For you, there is truth in both. There is a peace in the stillness of the house and the quiet of the night, but there is also the knowledge that tomorrow will bring more work, more tasks to be done, more duties to fulfill. The cycle is unbroken, and as much as you long for a moment's rest, you know it will always be fleeting. As the fire continues to burn low, you begin to rise, your body tired from the day's efforts. There are children to check on, a few final tasks to tend to before sleep can truly claim you. But as you move through the house, there's a gentleness in your steps, a softness in the way you carry yourself, as though the weight of the day has melted away for just a moment. The house is still, the world beyond it distant. You pass by the children's rooms, glancing in to see their small forms curled up in their beds, the faint sound of their breathing, a lullaby of sorts. It's a small comfort, this sight, a reminder that the work, the endless cycle of labor, is not for nothing. There's purpose in it. The house is alive with their presence, with their laughter, with the moments they will grow into. Historians still wonder about the role of motherhood in 18th century life. Was it seen as the pinnacle of a woman's existence, or was it simply another role that came with the domestic sphere? Some suggest that motherhood, like everything else, was shaped by the demands of the household, always busy, always full of need. Others argue that motherhood was where women found their greatest sense of self, in the nurturing and care of their children. For you, it's somewhere in between. Motherhood is both a duty and a privilege, both a challenge and a reward. In the quiet moments when the house settles into sleep, you can almost feel the weight of the years to come. The years when the children will grow, when they will need you less, when the house will feel emptier, quieter. It's a bittersweet thought, knowing that this time, this phase of your life is passing. But for now, you are here, in this moment. The house is at rest, the work is done, and there is peace in the knowing that tomorrow you will rise to do it all again. But for tonight, there's nothing more to do. You can let the quiet embrace you, let the stillness fill the spaces that are usually occupied by the rush of the day. Historians often note that the women of the 18th century left behind few personal records, few traces of their inner lives. The work they did was seen as essential but unremarkable, a routine that shaped their days but left little room for self-expression. But in the quiet moments, in the stillness of the night, perhaps they found something that can never be recorded, something beyond the work, beyond the labor. Maybe it was in those fleeting, quiet moments that they found their true selves. For you, there's peace in the knowing that your labor is not for nothing, that the work you do matters, even if it is unseen. The house may be quiet now, but it's alive with the presence of your family, with the love and care that fills every corner. And as you prepare for rest, there's a small sense of pride in that. Pride in knowing that, no matter how small the task, it is done with care, with purpose. The house will rise again with the morning light, and tomorrow the cycle will begin once more. But for tonight, there is only peace. The night deepens as the last flickers of firelight fade, and you move quietly through the house. The soft creaks of the floorboards the only sound accompanying you. Everything is in its place, every chore completed, every last candle extinguished. The children's rooms are quiet, the comforting hum of their breathing a gentle reminder of the life you've nurtured. The house for now is still, and so are you, if only for a moment. The weight of the day has settled into the corners of your mind, but there's still a quiet energy in you, an awareness that tomorrow will bring more. It's a paradox of sorts, this constant motion, this steady rhythm of labor that fills your waking hours. There's peace in it, yes, but also a longing for something more, something beyond the boundaries of the home. You've dedicated yourself entirely to this life, to this endless cycle, but there's always a question that lingers in the back of your mind. What is it all for? Historians still argue whether 18th century women ever had the chance to consider this question in any meaningful way. Was the work of the household seen as the pinnacle of their purpose, the fulfillment of their duty? Or was it simply a way of passing time, a necessity to keep the world running? Some scholars argue that women found a sense of identity in their role as caretakers, that they understood their labor as integral to the survival and success of the family. Others suggest that this view ignores the complexity of women's lives, reducing them to mere caretakers while failing to recognize their hopes, dreams, and desires. You understand both perspectives. On the one hand, you feel a deep sense of fulfillment in the work you do, the meals you prepare, the children you raise, the home you care for. It feels purposeful. You can see the impact of your efforts in the laughter of the children, in the warmth of the house, and the simple joy that comes from a meal shared together. On the other hand, there are moments, fleeting moments, when you wish for something more. Something outside the walls of this house, something beyond the daily tasks that occupy your time. But for now, that longing is just a whisper, a faint echo that fades as the night deepens. You think about how the house feels alive with the rhythms of the day, the constant motion that fills it. There's something comforting about the predictability of it all, the knowledge that even though tomorrow will bring more of the same, it will also bring its own unique moments. There will be meals to prepare, children to care for, chores to complete. The cycle will continue and you will be there to meet it. The fire is almost out now, and the room is bathed in the soft glow of the embers. The night air is cool against your skin, and you pause by the window for a moment, looking out at the stars. There's a stillness to the world outside, a quiet that mirrors the peace in the house. The moment feels timeless, a rare respite from the constant demands of the day. Historians often debate whether rural women of the 18th century ever had the luxury of such quiet moments. Was the daily labor so overwhelming that there was no space to reflect, to rest? Or did women find a way to carve out moments of peace, however brief, amid the chaos of the home? Some believe that rural life, with its connection to the land and the cycles of nature, provided a different kind of rhythm, one that allowed for reflection and stillness. Others suggest that the sheer physical demands of rural life left little room for such moments, that women were simply too busy to appreciate the quiet that surrounded them. For you, there is truth in both. You know the work is never ending, that there is always something to be done, someone to care for, a task that needs your attention. But there are moments, like now, when the house is at rest, when the world outside is quiet, when you feel a sense of peace, of connection to something beyond the everyday routine. As you stand by the window watching the stars above, you feel a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the work you do matters. It's easy to forget in the midst of the constant tasks, the never-ending cycle of labor, but tonight you feel it deeply. The house is warm, the children are safe, and for a moment you are still. The weight of the day may press on you, but for tonight, it's a gentle weight, a reminder of the life you've built. The children will wake soon, the morning will arrive, and the cycle will begin again. But for now, you allow yourself this quiet, this moment of reflection. Tomorrow, the work will resume, the rhythm will continue, and the house will once again come alive with the sound of your labor. But for tonight, there is peace in the stillness. Historians often find it difficult to capture the nuance of women's lives in the 18th century. The balance between duty and desire, between the endless work of the household and the yearning for something more. They were not merely caretakers, not merely laborers. They were individuals with hopes, dreams, and identities that stretched beyond the walls of their homes. And yet, so much of their lives has been lost to history, buried beneath the weight of their domestic roles. For you, that sense of individuality is not always visible in the daily work, but it's there, in the quiet moments of reflection, in the small choices you make that shape the rhythm of the day. The labor may define your life, but it does not define you. You are more than the tasks you perform, more than the role you play. And for tonight, in this moment of peace, that truth feels more tangible than ever. The stars shine brightly above, and the house remains quiet. The day is over, and for now, there is only rest. The cycle will continue tomorrow, but for tonight, the rhythm slows and the world feels still. The stillness of the night stretches on, the house sinking deeper into its slumber. The wind outside hums softly, a lullaby of sorts as the world beyond seems to disappear, leaving you to your thoughts. The shadows in the room lengthen and you stand there for a moment, simply existing within the walls of this house. This place that has held you, nurtured you, and shaped you in ways you might never fully understand. It's strange in a way how the house becomes an extension of you. The walls, the floors, the very fabric of it all intertwining with your existence. You can't help but reflect on the weight of the daily tasks that have brought you here. When you think about it, the lives of 18th century women seem defined by these small, sometimes invisible acts. The constant work, the cycles that repeat without pause. Cooking, cleaning, tending to children, maintaining the home. These were the cornerstones of a woman's world. Historians often discuss how domestic labor was regarded as both essential and invisible, taken for granted, but foundational to the survival of the household. It was as if women were expected to do these things without acknowledgement, without credit, yet without their efforts, everything would falter. But in the quiet of the night, as you stand alone in this house, the weight of those invisible tasks feels more like a quiet strength. There's a certain power in what you do, the way you shape the rhythm of the house, the way your labor holds everything together. Even though no one outside the home may recognize your contributions, they're there, woven into the very fabric of daily life. It's an unspoken truth. The strength of the home, the strength of the family, relies on the work of women like you, whose hands remain busy and whose hearts remain devoted. Still, there's a part of you that wonders whether the world ever recognized this power. Historians have long debated whether 18th century women had any influence beyond the household. Some argue that the domestic sphere provided a subtle form of power, that the choices women made within the home, what to cook, how to organize, how to educate the children, were all acts of influence, though often invisible to the outside world. Others argue that this power was an illusion, that the home was simply a place where women were confined, with little freedom to exercise any true authority. For you, it's somewhere in between. You know the power that lies in the quiet decisions made every day, the food you choose to prepare, the lessons you teach, the ways in which you care for your family. It's a quiet power, but it's there, flowing through the rhythm of your daily life. Yet you also feel the weight of the unacknowledged work, the feeling that your contributions are invisible, that your efforts are seen only when something goes wrong. The power is real, but it's often unspoken, uncelebrated. As the fire dies to a soft glow, you feel the weight of the day's work, but it's not the burden of exhaustion. It's the feeling of having given, of having shaped the world around you with your own hands. For all the debates among historians, for all the discussions of women's roles in the past, there's one truth that stands clear to you. The work you do matters. It might not always be acknowledged, it might not always be celebrated, but it is the thread that holds everything together. You move silently through the house, checking the rooms one last time, ensuring that everything is in its place, that the children are tucked safely in bed. There's a comfort in these rituals, in knowing that the work you've done today has prepared the house for tomorrow. It's an unspoken promise to yourself and to those around you, that you will rise again to meet the needs of the family, that the cycle will continue, unbroken. Historians still argue whether 18th century women ever felt a sense of satisfaction from the relentless cycle of domestic work. Some believe that this daily routine provided a deep sense of purpose, a steady rhythm that brought meaning to their lives. Others suggest that this constant cycle was exhausting and monotonous, leaving little room for personal fulfillment or self-expression. For you, the truth lies somewhere in between. The work is fulfilling in its own way. There's a deep satisfaction in caring for the house, in seeing the children safe and content, in knowing that your labor sustains everything around you. And yet, there are moments when you long for something more, something beyond the demands of the home. But tonight, as the house settles into its quiet rhythm, those longings fade, replaced by the comfort of knowing that the work is done and that you have done it well. The air in the house is cool now, the fire almost completely out, but the warmth remains in the walls, in the hearth, in the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The house is at rest, the world beyond it silent. For tonight, the cycle has paused and you allow yourself a brief moment of peace. Tomorrow, the work will begin again. But for now, you are content in the knowledge that this day, this moment, has been enough. The stars still shine brightly outside, the cool air carrying with it the promise of another day. The house is still, the children are safe, and you, standing alone in the quiet, know that this peace is yours, and that is enough. The night is full now, its quiet weight pressing down on everything. But there is a certain peace in this silence. The fire has dwindled to soft embers, its glow a faint reminder of the warmth that once filled the room. You stand by the window, looking out at the dark world beyond the walls of the house. The sky is an endless canvas of stars, each one a distant, silent witness to the passage of time. The cool air presses against the glass, as though urging you to step outside, to feel the night on your skin. But you remain inside, content in the stillness of the house. The children's rooms are quiet, their breath steady and deep in sleep. The world beyond this house, this small, contained world, is distant. It's almost as though the house itself has become a universe, a place where the noise of the world outside can't reach. There's something to be said for this kind of isolation, isn't there? It's easy to romanticize it, to imagine that the outside world is full of noise, chaos, and struggle, while here, within the walls of the house, there is peace. But you know better, don't you? You've lived this life long enough to understand the quiet complexities that come with it. Historians often debate the sense of autonomy or confinement felt by women in the 18th century, especially those in rural settings. On one hand, the house was their domain, their sphere of influence. Within the home, women had a great deal of authority, shaping the rhythms of the day, the meals, the care of children, and the overall atmosphere. On the other hand, this autonomy came at a cost. The house was also a place of isolation, and the work, while essential, often kept women removed from the broader world. Their lives were bound within these walls, socializing often limited to other women, and their public roles, if any, were confined to the family unit. But as you stand there, looking out into the silent night, there's a part of you that feels a certain reverence for the space you occupy. In this quiet moment, you can almost feel the centuries of women who have walked this same path. Those who spent their days tending to the home, shaping the world from the inside out, who lived within the same constraints and yet still found ways to carve out meaning in their lives. Historians still wrestle with the question of whether these women felt a sense of personal fulfillment. Were they content in their roles, or were they simply resigned to them, finding moments of joy in the small, everyday victories? It's a question with no clear answer, one that will forever be debated. For you, the answer is a delicate balance. You know that your life has been shaped by the same rhythms that shaped the women of centuries past. The work is hard, and there are moments when you long for more, for a break, for a sense of self that isn't tied to the demands of the home. Yet when you think about it, you realize that your identity is deeply intertwined with the life you've created here. This house, these children, the meals, the quiet moments shared in the stillness of the night. They are all a part of you, woven into the very fabric of who you are. The question of fulfillment is a complex one, isn't it? It's not about rejecting the role you play. It's about finding joy within it, despite the hard work and the isolation that sometimes comes with it. You return to your own thoughts, standing by the window, feeling the night air on your face, allowing it to wash over you for a moment before retreating back to the warmth of the house. The fire is almost gone now, the last of its embers slowly flickering out. There's a quiet finality to it, a sense that the day has truly come to an end. But as you move through the house, closing the shutters and dimming the lights, you know that the work is never really finished. Tomorrow will come with its own list of tasks, its own routines to follow. Historians continue to study the lives of women in the 18th century, sifting through the fragments of their existence to understand the nuances of their experiences. Some scholars suggest that the labor these women performed, while often invisible, was a critical form of resistance, a quiet defiance against a world that undervalued their contributions. Others argue that this work was simply a byproduct of their gendered roles, a necessity that left little room for personal agency. But in the quiet of the night, standing in this house, you wonder if it was something more, a testament to the strength of women who lived through challenges that few today can truly understand. Perhaps the quiet defiance of their daily labor wasn't something that needed to be visible. Perhaps it was simply enough to live with dignity, to carry out the work with care, to nurture a world from the inside out. The night has stretched on, and you can feel the pull of rest in your bones. The weight of the day is finally beginning to ease. Tomorrow will come with its own challenges, and yet there is comfort in knowing that the cycle continues. There's strength in the knowledge that you are a part of something larger, something timeless. You take a deep breath, the quiet hum of the house surrounding you, and for a moment, you allow yourself to feel the fullness of the life you've built. The world outside may be vast and unknown, but in here, within these walls, there is peace. There is purpose. And for tonight, that is enough. The house is quiet now, almost too quiet, as though it's holding its breath, waiting for the day to start anew. You slip into your bed, the soft linen cool against your skin, the weight of the covers gentle but reassuring. Outside, the world is still, the stars flickering softly above, just as they did centuries ago, when women like you were living out their lives in houses very much like this one. You wonder what they would have thought if they could see the world today. The changes, the shifts, the ways in which society has evolved. Would they feel pride in the progress made, or would they see the echoes of their own struggles still reverberating through time? Historians still wrestle with how to view the lives of 18th century women, particularly those in rural settings. Some argue that the work they did in the home was a form of empowerment, that it was an act of survival, and that in their own quiet way they held the power of the household. Others maintain that women were constrained by the very domesticity they nurtured, their roles limited by societal expectations that made it impossible for them to break free from the confines of the home. Both views hold weight depending on the lens through which you look at them. It's a debate that often circles back to the same central question. Was the life of an 18th century woman one of fulfillment or one of submission? For you, the answer is more complicated than either extreme. You've come to understand that fulfillment doesn't always look the way society expects. It's not always about public recognition or grand accomplishments. Sometimes it's in the small moments, the ones that happen behind closed doors when no one else is watching. When you care for your family, when you nurture the house, when you perform those small tasks that hold everything together, there is a quiet fulfillment in that. It's a different kind of power, one that's not measured in wealth or status, but in the ability to create a life worth living, to build something that will last beyond your own years. But at the same time, there's no denying that the work you do is often thankless, invisible. Historians often argue that the labor of 18th century women was undervalued, a reality that has carried over into modern times. The chores and duties that once filled a woman's day, cooking, cleaning, washing, caring for children, are often dismissed as women's work, as though they are any less important than the work done by men outside the home. You know better than anyone that this work is foundational. It is the backbone of the household, the stuff that keeps the world turning, and yet it is rarely recognized as such. You've come to a realization, though, as you lie here in the stillness of the night. The world may not see the value in your labor, but you do, and perhaps that's enough. You've come to appreciate that fulfillment doesn't come from external recognition, but from knowing that you've done your best, that you've poured your heart into the work, and that you've created a space that nurtures those who live within it. Historians often debate whether 18th century women had any form of agency within the domestic sphere. Some scholars argue that domestic labor allowed women a certain form of autonomy, while others believe that it confined them to a life of servitude. The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in between. Domestic labor may have been exhausting, but it also provided women with a unique form of control over their environment. It was within these walls that they shaped the rhythms of daily life, that they made the decisions that influenced the course of the family's existence. That power, while not often acknowledged, was real. For you, there's a quiet pride in the work you do. It's not always glamorous, and it's not always easy, but it is important. You are creating a space where your family can thrive, a place where the future is nurtured, one meal at a time, one chore at a time, one small decision at a time. In this quiet, hidden labor, there is strength. There is power. And there is a deep, undeniable sense of purpose. As you close your eyes and let the quiet of the night wash over you, you feel a sense of peace settling in your bones. The work you've done today, the tasks you've completed, are enough. Tomorrow will come with its own challenges, but for tonight you are content. You've built something that will endure, something that will carry forward into the future, even after you're gone. That perhaps is the ultimate fulfillment. Knowing that you've shaped a life, a home, and a future with your own two hands. The night stretches on, and you feel yourself drifting towards sleep. The quiet of the house, the steady rhythm of your breath, the soft embrace of the bed. Everything feels in place, as though the world has come to a gentle, quiet rest. The work of the day is over, and for now, there is peace. Tomorrow will come, and the cycle will begin again. But for tonight, you let the stillness embrace you. The house is at rest, and so are you. The early morning light begins to creep into the room, the faintest glow spreading across the floor, painting everything with a soft, golden hue. You wake slowly, the world still wrapped in the quiet of the night's end. There's something peaceful about the dawn, something that feels like a fresh start, even though you know the day ahead will be much like the one before. But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? The constant, steady rhythm of life, where each new day brings the promise of small, familiar routines. In a way, it's comforting to know that no matter what happens, the work will remain the same. The tasks you face will be familiar, and in that familiarity there is a certain peace. As the sun rises higher, you start to hear the stirrings of the house around you. The creaks of the floors, the soft rustling of the wind outside. The children will wake soon, their voices filling the house with energy and life. The quiet moments of the night will fade away, and the day will begin, bringing with it its own set of demands. But for now, there's a brief moment of stillness before the day takes hold. Historians often discuss how the rhythms of daily life shaped the world of 18th century women. The dawn was a significant part of that rhythm. Early morning spent gathering water, lighting the fire, preparing breakfast for the family. These were tasks that were repeated every day, creating a steady, predictable pattern that marked the passage of time. In a way, the repetition of these tasks was both a comfort and a burden. There was security in the routine, but also the exhaustion of knowing that the work would never truly end. The chores would always be there, the demands unceasing. You, however, know that the work is not just about completing tasks. It's about setting the tone for the day. The meal you prepare will fuel the family for the hours ahead. The way you arrange the house, the small rituals you follow, these things create an atmosphere, a sense of order and peace. In the quiet moments of morning, you can feel the weight of the day ahead, but you also feel a sense of control. This, too, is part of the power of the domestic sphere. It's not always about the visible work. Sometimes it's in the way you create a space that holds everything together. Historians still argue whether the work of 18th century women, while central to family life, was ultimately fulfilling. Some argue that the routine of domestic labor provided women with a sense of purpose, a feeling of connection to the family and to the larger rhythms of life. Others suggest that the repetition of these tasks day after day might have felt confining, leaving little room for personal growth or creative expression. It's a difficult question to answer, as the answer depends on the woman, her circumstances, and how she viewed her role within the family. For you, the answer is simple. The work is fulfilling because it is purposeful. The tasks may be repetitive, but they are also necessary. They sustain the family, they nourish the home, and they provide a sense of continuity, a sense of belonging. There's a quiet strength in this, in knowing that your efforts are shaping the day, shaping the future, even in ways that no one else will notice. The sun rises higher now, and you hear the soft shuffle of footsteps down the hallway. The children are awake. The day is beginning. You move into action, lighting the fire, preparing the breakfast, and getting the house ready for another day. The rhythm of it all is familiar, comforting even. And as the house slowly stirs to life, you know that you are part of something larger, something that has endured for centuries. The work you do, though often invisible, is crucial. It keeps the world turning, it holds the family together, and it shapes the course of the future. As you go about your tasks, the weight of yesterday's quiet reflection seems to fade. The work takes over, as it always does, and the familiar tasks of the morning ground you in the present. The house is full of life now, the children's laughter filling the halls, the smell of breakfast wafting through the air. You are part of this world, part of this cycle. You are shaping the day, shaping the family, and in doing so, shaping the future. The day may bring its challenges, its frustrations, but it will also bring its small victories. There will be moments of satisfaction in the work, moments of connection with the family, moments when you can feel the rhythm of life moving forward, steady and sure. And as the day unfolds, you'll continue your quiet labor, knowing that the work you do is important, even if the world outside doesn't always recognize it. Historians may still debate the role of women in the 18th century, but as you stand here in the quiet of the morning, preparing the house for the day, you know that your role is essential. You are the heartbeat of this house, the one who sets the rhythm of the day, the one who holds everything together. And in that, there is power. Quiet, unacknowledged, but undeniable. The day moves on, the hours ticking by slowly but steadily. The chores have been completed. Well, most of them. The children are fed, the house is in order, and yet there's always more to be done. It's the rhythm of life, this endless loop of tasks that seem never-ending. But as you move from one task to the next, there's a quiet satisfaction in the act of doing. It's not always about finishing, it's about being part of something, a cycle that continues long after you're gone. There's a small comfort in this realization, isn't there? That the work you do, the work of every day, becomes part of something bigger. It becomes part of history, part of a legacy that will continue, even as you fade into the past. In this moment, you think of the women who have come before you, the ones who have lived lives not so different from your own. The 18th century housewife, the woman who worked from dawn until dusk to keep the household running, to ensure that her family had what it needed to survive. Historians have long debated whether these women saw themselves as creators of a legacy, or whether they simply did the work because it needed to be done. But perhaps that's the beauty of it. You don't need to make a grand gesture. You don't need to create something monumental. Sometimes the most significant contributions are the quiet ones, the everyday acts of care and labor that sustain the world. You stop for a moment, your hands still on the dishes you've been washing, and you think about that. You think about the women who, for centuries, have performed the same tasks you're doing now. Women who have cared for their families, nurtured their homes, and built lives from the ground up. They didn't have the luxury of fame, of recognition, but their work mattered. It mattered to their families, to their communities, and to history, even if it was often overlooked. Historians still argue whether these women saw their labor as empowering or as confining. Some suggest that the act of caring for the family, managing the household, and ensuring the survival of the home was a form of power in itself. Others believe that the constant demands of domestic life left little room for personal fulfillment, and that women were trapped in a cycle of labor that left them little time to pursue their own interests or dreams. But you realize as you stand there, your hands immersed in warm water, that the answer is more complex than either of these arguments. For you, the work is both empowering and exhausting. It is both confining and freeing. There are days when you long for more time for yourself, more opportunities to explore beyond these walls, more recognition for the work you do. And yet, there are also days when you find deep satisfaction in the act of caring for your home, of ensuring that your family has everything they need, of creating a space that feels like a sanctuary. It's a delicate balance, isn't it, between the work you do and the life you lead. The house is quiet again, the children off playing outside, and you sit down for a moment, your thoughts drifting. Historians often speak of the 18th century housewife's role as being one of sacrifice, of selflessness, and while that's true, there's another side to it, one that's often overlooked. There's a quiet strength in this work, a quiet power that comes from doing something well, from giving your best to those you love. You may not always see it, but it's there, woven into the fabric of your everyday life. You realize now that perhaps the debate among historians about 18th century women's sense of agency is misplaced. It's not about whether these women had power in the traditional sense, because they may not have. It's about the power they had within their own sphere, the power to shape the world around them, to create a life that worked for them and their families. That's the real power, isn't it? The quiet, everyday power of creating a home, of nurturing life, of ensuring that tomorrow is a little bit better than today. In this, you have more agency than anyone could have realized. As you sit there, letting the day unfold around you, the weight of your thoughts begins to lift. Tomorrow will bring more of the same, more chores, more routines, but it will also bring more opportunities to shape the life you've built. The future is uncertain, but for now, there is peace in knowing that the work you do matters. It may not be glamorous, it may not be recognized by the world, but it's essential. It holds everything together, and in that, there is power. As the evening sets in and you prepare for bed, there is a quiet contentment in your heart. The day has been long, but it's been full of purpose, full of meaning. And when you close your eyes tonight, you'll know that tomorrow will be just like today, full of small, meaningful acts that make up the fabric of a life well lived. Historians may continue to argue over the role of women in the 18th century, but as you drift off to sleep, you know the truth. The power of these women wasn't in the visible achievements they left behind. It was in the lives they nurtured, the homes they built, and the love they gave. And in that, they shaped history more than anyone could have ever imagined.